Welcome to Moonlit Publishing. In a world ruled by male alphas, one woman was born different, the first female alpha.
Chapter 1. They told my mother her womb was cursed the moment I let out my first cry. In a world of steel-bodied kings and lethal strategy, a female alpha isn't just a rarity, it's an impossibility. But as my black paws tear through the damp earth, I don't feel like an impossibility. I feel like a god. I am the only one of my kind, a glitch in the ancient lineage of lycanthropes, yet the question remains, can a queen truly lead when the entire world is waiting for her to submit? The air tonight is thick with the scent of pine and pine resin, the rhythm of my pack falling behind me like a fading heartbeat. I've spent months suppressing the human girl, letting the beast take the reins. My fur is a shadow moving through shadows, elegant, muscular, and utterly alone. Alpha, the voice of Gregor, my second in command, cuts through the hypnotic rush of the wind. I skidded to a halt, muscles bunching under my skin as the pack gathered, their golden eyes reflecting a mixture of loyalty and deep-seated doubt. Alpha Trentino is here, Gregor murmurs, his icy gaze fixed on mine. He's requesting your presence. The name hits me like a physical blow. Trentino, the leader of the Red Raven pack. Powerful. Crucial. The man who could either validate my crown or strip it away. I don't wait for a dismissal. I bolt. I tear through the underbrush toward my private cottage, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Please let him be the one. I need the mate link to snap. I need that biological balance to silence the whispers of my own people and the ridicule of the world. I shift mid-stride, the transition from fur to skin a searing, cold jolt. There's no time for modesty. I scrub the scent of the forest from my skin until I smell of nothing but lemon and desperation. I pull on a simple hoodie and jeans, functional, plain, praying that if the fates are real, my clothes won't matter. Alpha. Gregor's voice echoes from the basement. They're here. I descend the stairs, my lungs tight. My eyes immediately rake over the men standing there, scalloped with scars, radiating a cold, predatory heat. I strain my senses, searching for that legendary scent, that intoxicating pull that's supposed to drive a wolf mad. But there is only silence. Luna Vyanatha, the man in the center, speaks. His voice is power personified. This is Trentino. My skin doesn't prickle. My blood doesn't sing. Instead, a cold, hard knot forms in my gut. It's Alpha Vyanatha, I snap, the correction coming out like a snarl. I see the flicker of disappointment in his eyes, mirrored by the hollow ache in my own chest. He claims he's here for a treaty, but we both know the truth. I've just turned 18. I am finally ripe for the mate link. Trentino didn't come for a partner. He came for a territory expansion. And as I stare into his cold eyes, I realize the open loop of my destiny just became a noose. Chapter 2. It's all right, Vyanatha, Gregor cooed as I wept. His voice was low, gentle, and as calm as ever. We were sitting on the couch together in the living room, Alpha Trentino and his pack members long gone. The second they closed the front door, I was in tears, overwhelmed so completely that Gregor had to guide me to the leather couch because I couldn't see through the blur. I couldn't even explain why I was so distressed. I just kept crying until my eyes felt swollen and my throat ached. This is why women weren't supposed to be alphas. How was I supposed to lead my pack into battle if I cried simply because some alpha wasn't my mate? I felt weak. I felt pathetic. My parents were right. My pack should shun me. I should hate myself. I did hate myself. I'm never going to find a mate, I whimpered, keeping my face buried in my hands. I was horrified by my actions, but I couldn't seem to stop this display of weakness, even though I knew Gregor was right next to me, watching me crumble. I felt alone, helpless, and confused. He's out there somewhere, Gregor said softly. His voice somehow made me feel better and worse all at once. I was lucky to have such a sensitive and caring second in command. He was always more concerned for me than he was for himself. But, on the other hand, if I were like Alpha Trentino, big, intimidating, and tough, he wouldn't have to see me in such a state. He wouldn't have to watch his leader fall to shambles. But even those thoughts didn't make me pull myself together. Instead, they made me ramble. Then what do I do if I find him? He's going to overthrow my position. He'll have to. He'll take his place as an alpha, and I'll be nothing more than a Luna. As the gears turned in my brain, my tears stopped, and I forced myself off the couch, becoming angrier than upset. I don't want to be a Luna. I was born an alpha, and I deserve that title, and some other alpha is just going to waltz into my pack and take what is mine just because I'm a woman. I paced restlessly now, like a caged animal, and I felt my wolf wanting to come out. This wasn't fair. This was my pack, my people, my land. No one was going to rule it for me simply because they were a man. You know it would take a very strong alpha to overthrow someone with your bloodline. And maybe they won't want to. They're going to love you so much their heart will ache every time they see you. They'll just want you to be happy, and if that means you are both alphas of two separate packs, then that's okay. Gregor's voice rang true and honest. But this was easy for him. He had a beautiful mate and wife who loved him. She would do anything for him, but she was of a lower ranking. She didn't have the drive for dominance and power struggles that alphas did. All she had was a tender husband and a very distraught leader. I need to go for a run, I grunted. My skin was itching, my brain was a hurricane, and my wolf felt beyond agitated. But you were just out for a run, Gregor argued. His blue eyes were watching me intently from the couch. He was trying to figure out what was going on inside my head and how he could calm me. I have to go, I blurted. Gregor got up to follow me, but I held up my hand to stop him. I couldn't deal with anyone right now, even him. Stay here. I really just need time to think things through. Go see your wife. Watch the lands. Do whatever you want. You can have the rest of the night off. Gregor paused as if he was about to argue, but I knew what was going on in his head. He was devoted to his mate like every other werewolf. He cared about the pack and me deeply, but I was nothing compared to his wife. There was no way he could deny my offer to spend more time with her. All right, if you really don't want me to come with you, I won't. But please be careful. He held my gaze for a few seconds, and then he was gone. I waited for a few moments, making sure he was out of sight and earshot, then I stripped down and burst from my house. Shifting wasn't as natural as it should have been. I expected to launch out of the house and land with a coat of black fur and a muzzle. Instead, I had to exert an impressive amount of force into the transition and suppress a whimper when my body contorted. As much as my wolf wanted to be let out, it was like something was fighting her. But once I was free from the confines of my human body, there was nothing stopping me. I darted through the woods that surrounded my territory like a stray bullet. I had no target, no destination. I just needed to go and be a wolf, letting out all of the frustration and anxiety before it consumed me. I ran and ran. My lungs were burning. My eyes were blurring. My heart was bashing against my ribs from the exertion. But I didn't stop. At one point, I allowed my human side to intervene slightly. I didn't want to give myself a heart attack or die of exhaustion, but my wolf shut me out entirely. I might have been unaware of where we were going, but it seemed she had a plan. Or maybe she was just being the coward I wanted to be, and we were running away from it all for good. Chapter 3. I thought I was going to run forever or until my heart exploded in my chest. I could feel the pain. My body was trying to communicate through physical agony, telling me to stop. But my wolf eventually slowed to a trot, her black ears swiveling. While she seemed focused on finding something, I was more focused on making sure my exhausted body wasn't going to collapse. I still couldn't understand what was going on in her head. Every time I tried to figure out what she was thinking or feeling, she would shut me out entirely. I would have forced her to shift back into human form if I could have, but she was significantly stronger than I was, and she wanted nothing to do with me. Even when she was just plodding along through the forest, I had no idea what was going on in her mind. Then I was thrown to the ground. My body was slammed down so hard and so quickly that I couldn't comprehend what was happening until I was splayed on my side, vulnerable. I was too slow. When I attempted to jerk back onto my legs, I felt teeth placed firmly on the skin of my neck, and a feral snarl came from the wolf holding me down. It was a warning. I was not to move a muscle, or my neck would be shattered. My muddled mind tried to grasp what had happened, and the truth became clear quickly. Dread pooled in my stomach as I assessed my surroundings. When I let my wolf take over, I hadn't even thought about crossing into another pack's territory. I hadn't thought she would be foolish enough to trespass. Clearly, I was wrong. Traveling into another pack's territory without permission is a massive offense. It is a threat, a challenge, and a sign of disrespect. Wolves are killed over territory often. My own pack members have died because of it, and we have killed outsiders for the same reason. It's disturbingly common. I didn't want to die, and I genuinely meant no harm. When the wolf standing over me tightened his jaws around my throat, I let out a whimper and slowly lay my head down. It was a sign of submission, and though it repulsed me, I'd rather lose my dignity than my life. I couldn't win this fight. Even if he allowed me to get up, there was no telling how many wolves would come running when he howled. My pack was too far away to protect me. Thankfully, the sharp canines were removed from my fur, but the wolf didn't leave. He couldn't. I might be submissive, but I was still trespassing, and this was a matter for his alpha. He growled at me, ordering me to stand up. I moved slowly until I was standing on wobbly legs. The warrior examined me as he moved behind me. I knew I was nothing as he'd seen before. I didn't look like a female of our kind usually does. I was lean and powerful. Even though he could feel my dominance, he was baffled. I didn't look the way they expected a female to look, yet I wasn't hulking like a male alpha either. He eventually snapped out of his confusion and nudged my hind leg, forcing me forward. I went willingly. The less I fought him, the easier this would be. As we moved through the forest toward the pack grounds, I saw how outnumbered I was. A dozen pairs of glowing eyes narrowed in on me. These wolves were much like my own, big enough that I only came up to their shoulders, with bulging muscles and alert senses. They could have smelled me from a mile away. I could take one of them if I were lucky, but I had no prayer of winning against a pack. Thankfully, none of the other wolves confronted us, and we didn't stop until we reached the outskirts of the pack grounds. "Shift," the man ordered, already in his human form and pulling a shirt over his head. I snarled at him in disgust. He was not going to order me around, and I certainly wasn't going to stand there exposed. I had my dignity, even in these circumstances. The man rolled his eyes, now fully clothed. "Here," he snapped, shoving an enormous shirt at me. "Now shift." I gave him one last snarl before I forced my body out of my wolf fur. The shirt didn't cover as much as I would have liked, coming down just below my hips, but it did the job. With at least 12 wary wolves circling me, I wasn't going to complain. I followed the man through his pack lands, observing the homes, the training facilities, and the schools. It was much like my home, merely smaller and more isolated. The man kept watching me, likely thinking I was mapping his territory for an attack. I almost scoffed at the idea, but continued to follow him silently. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until my wolf desperately attempted to break free. It was so severe and sudden that I dropped to my knees as the bones cracked and twisted. The internal struggle was savage. I clutched handfuls of dirt, gasping for air as I tried to keep control. "What are you doing?" the man snapped. He immediately assumed a fighting stance, thinking I was going to attack. I heard his pack mates move out of the surrounding forest, and other fighters edged closer. Like any pack, the safety of the community was the first priority. In seconds, a circle of men formed around me, tightening to prevent violence. I didn't want to fight. I wanted this to be peaceful. But my wolf was having none of it. While I was on my knees, panting with the effort of staying human, she took her chance. I was too weak to fight her. My skin became a thick coat of black fur, and the second my forepaws hit the gravel, I took off in a sprint. My wolf was in full control. She dove between the legs of one of the men circling us, and we were gone. All my previous exhaustion evaporated. I had no idea where she was taking me, but I was grateful my sleek body was too fast for the bulky fighters to catch. Even in their wolf forms, they were strong but not agile. My wolf flew through the packlands like she had been there before. It felt oddly familiar, but the human in me was mortified. Children were scurrying away from what appeared to be a rogue wolf, and families were retreating into their homes for protection. But I wasn't interested in attacking anyone. My wolf wasn't seeing red. She wasn't snarling. She would never harm anyone without reason. My intent finally became clear when my wolf stopped directly in front of an unknown man and let out a long, excited howl. I had found him. Chapter 4. My mate appeared to be quite frightened of my black wolf. He kept trying to take a step back every time she inched closer out of curiosity. His soft green eyes flickered around, looking for someone to assist him. He knew he couldn't take my wolf on alone, but she wasn't challenging him in the slightest. In fact, she was quite upset that he hadn't thrown his arms around her already. I could see the bond in his eyes. He wanted to touch me, but he was terrified of my overbearing wolf. He was highly aware that anyone in wolf form is unpredictable and dangerous. I forced my wolf to stop pursuing him. She hated the idea. All she wanted was to investigate this man and figure him out immediately. She and I had been waiting for him for so long that it was hard to control ourselves. Eventually, she complied and sat down on the rough gravel with her tongue slipping out in a childish manner. My mate nearly took another step back, but stopped himself, seemingly understanding that we were trying to make him feel comfortable. His large hand extended towards me, and I could see just how shaky it was. Yet, he placed it gently on the side of my face, hardly touching the tips of my fur. That was more than enough for me. My wolf closed her eyes and let out a contented sigh as a pleasant feeling wafted through her system. All of the stress, panic, and strain from moments before simply evaporated. He was the reason she came here. This wary man with bright green eyes and a gentle hand was the reason we had dashed across miles of land. There was nothing to regret. There she is, a warrior screamed from behind me. That cozy feeling my mate had created dissolved within seconds. My wolf was back on her feet, crouched low and snarling. The kind wolf I had been with my mate was gone, and the alpha returned. About 6 wolves were racing towards me with 3 humans further behind. My rash acts had certainly stirred this community, and now it was time to face the consequences. I knew I couldn't take them all. They were far larger than I, and there were so many of them, but I wasn't going to go down without a fight. Especially since I had finally found what I was looking for. Still, I had a hard time remaining aggressive when my mate's hands slowly moved over my hackles, smoothing them down. I wanted to be threatening, to protect myself, but his steady touch was far too distracting. I could feel that he wasn't too concerned about his pack mates racing towards us. He must have known that his pack would never hurt their own, and he would never let harm come to me. The warriors were a few feet away in a matter of seconds. I was not to get away this time, that much was clear. Shift, a man demanded stiffly. A shirt was thrown at my feet. Shift now or we will have no choice but to take your actions as a threat to our community. He wasn't lying. With every passing second, the men edged closer. It didn't take much force to overpower my wolf now, thankfully. She had gotten what she wanted. When I was fully in human form, I quickly pulled the shirt over my head. My mate might have been here, but so were his pack mates, and I was still a proud, stubborn leader. 2 different men grabbed each of my arms and yanked me forward. I looked at my mate, startled by their rudeness, but as my eyes roamed his body, my mouth became glued shut. I grew up knowing mates were supposed to be everything for each other, but feeling it for the first time was incredible. He was perfect. He was tall, over 6 feet with broad shoulders, but he wasn't bulky. He was lean with thick chestnut brown hair and those vibrant green eyes. Pale scars were webbed over his skin in a few areas. Marks showing he was a man who had seen his share of struggles. He looked fearless and strong. And he was mine. I forced myself to look away, trying not to appear lovesick. I was still a proud and dignified alpha, so I guided my attention elsewhere. The women and children I had scared were now looking at me with shock and fear as we passed. I felt a guilt knot in my stomach. I hadn't meant to frighten anyone. I merely wanted what was mine. Well, there she is, a deep, masculine voice boomed. The words didn't send chills down my spine. They weren't from my mate. A wave of strength hit me as the 2 men turned me around to face the speaker. He was hulking, likely 6.5 feet tall, with massive muscles. His hair was cut short, and his eyes were frequently moving, scanning for danger. His stance was cocky. Alpha Vianatha, when I heard there was an intruder in my territory, I didn't expect it to be you, he said softly. At the mention of me being an alpha, my arms were released. My apologies, I said stiffly. The man before me was the alpha. I could feel the strength coming off him in waves. His own pack members were looking at him with admiration. He was clearly the leader of these men. And the man next to me, my mate, he had no force like this. He didn't smell like a beta. He didn't feel like a warrior. My mate held such a low status that he wasn't even used to fighting off other wolves. My mate was an omega. Chapter 5. So, what are you doing on my land? The alpha asked. His voice was friendly enough. I was no longer a threat, just a fellow alpha. Whether he was truly concerned or not didn't show. It was all about courtesy and respect now, two leaders having a conversation. The difference was that I had just found my mate, and he was nothing like I expected. I couldn't even form a sentence. I just stared at my mate and slowly shook my head in disbelief. How could I not be mated to an alpha? I came from a long line of powerful werewolves. I was already considered the family flaw, and now this? My mate was supposed to save me. He was supposed to earn my parents' respect and make my pack obedient. He was supposed to be the leader everyone was waiting for. But he was an omega. This felt like another cruel joke by the moon goddess. Finally, the alpha of this pack seemed to understand the silence. You're here for your mate, he stated, his nostrils flaring. You're of age now. I found him, I whispered. Speaking pulled me out of my trance, and a plan formulated immediately. If you don't mind, I think he and I should be leaving shortly. I have been away from my pack for some time, and we have much to discuss. I tried to keep my voice level, but it wavered. I couldn't hide how much this was devastating me. Oh? You found him so soon? Who is he then? The alpha asked. I didn't miss the way his eyes moved across his warriors. He had ruled himself out, feeling no pull to me, and it was only natural to assume I would be mated to someone strong. But he was wrong. Him, I stated, pointing at my mate who had yet to utter a sound. The instant the attention shifted to him, my mate began to jitter. I could feel his anxiety in waves. Grantham. The alpha's brow furrowed deeply. You're sure Grantham is your mate? I paused, understanding the alpha's confusion. How could I be mated to someone so thin, so weak, and of such low ranking? For a second, I considered lying, claiming I was mistaken, and bolting from the embarrassment. But those green eyes burned into mine, making my heart soften. As much as I hated the blow to my pride, I could not deny the reality. Yes, I'm certain. The alpha blinked in astonishment, but his decision was quick. Take him then. He's not much use to us here. It was harsh, and I had to suppress a growl. He was my mate, and I was an alpha. He was not to be treated like that. Still, it was a practical move. He was low-ranking with few ties, and this alpha wasn't going to risk security by allowing another alpha to linger on his territory just for an omega's bond. I just didn't like someone speaking for my mate and making choices on his behalf. Thank you, I said stiffly. I turned to Grantham. Should we go to your home and grab your belongings before we leave? Several snorts and snickers came from the men surrounding us, and Grantham's cheeks flamed a dark red. He couldn't even meet my eyes. The alpha cleared his throat, appearing to suppress a laugh. Alpha Vianatha, I'm sorry to inform you, but Grantham doesn't actually speak. I looked back at Grantham, who had his head lowered in shame. Not only was my mate the lowest-ranking wolf in his pack, but he was also mute. His own pack thought he was so useless that they wanted me to take him off their hands immediately. All right, I choked out, desperately clinging to my dignity. I guess we'll just be on our way then. Grantham seemed startled by the sudden departure and lifted his head, eyes wide. I ignored him. We needed to leave before I crumbled under the pressure. I wove through the men, grabbed my mate's hand, and began pulling him toward the trees. It was lovely meeting you, Alpha Vianatha, the alpha called. I could hear some of his pack members laughing now. Grantham lagged behind me. I wasn't sure if he was frightened or if he actually wanted to collect his things, but I couldn't care. I was being degraded every second I remained on this soil. I shifted into my wolf form, the power of the change leaving my human constraints behind. Grantham didn't shift with me as I anticipated. He just stood there, looking back at the pack he was leaving. The Omega was ignoring me. I was his mate and an alpha. He had no right to disrespect me. I crouched low and let out a warning snarl. Grantham let out a soft sigh of submission. His shift was different, however. While mine was relatively easy, Grantham's was labored, his body tensing with the heavy effort of the change. He squeezed his eyes shut until the transformation was complete. My less sympathetic side was too focused on leaving. I moved behind him and snapped at his hind legs to get him moving. Grantham's wolf took off at a slow, lethargic lope. From behind him, my wolf assessed him. She wasn't concerned about his rank. The mating bond was too strong for that. Instead, she noticed the deep scars covering him, leaving his fur patchy. He wasn't a warrior. He was too small to fight. Though his baggy clothing had made him appear larger, I could now see his ribs jutting out. He was malnourished. He was tall but unstable, and every step seemed to be hard work for him. I realized then that his old pack had likely used his werewolf as little more than a training dummy. Chapter 6. Within the first hour of being on my pack land, I discovered just how much Grantham hated being around people. When we entered my territory, my warriors spotted us immediately and began to investigate the newcomer with passive interest. Their daunting forms intimidated Grantham to no end, even though they weren't behaving aggressively. He tried unsuccessfully to hide his fear as they caught his scent. His eyes darted around, and he constantly tried to move out of their range, looking worried they might snap at his badly damaged fur. After that, things only got worse. Once the warriors made it clear he was no threat, the rest of the pack became curious. People gawked from afar, while others came close to eye him up. I knew everyone was wondering who he was and why their alpha had brought this bedraggled wolf onto their territory with no warning. It had been years since an intruder had breached our borders. I was not prepared to announce that he was my mate. Hearing his heavy breathing and watching his exhausted steps, I knew he wouldn't be able to handle that pressure right now either. Besides, everyone was already watching. Someone would eventually piece together the truth. The chaos was so evident that I didn't even have to call for the pack doctor. As we neared my home, I saw Carmilla, a gorgeous blonde woman, hustling toward us with a medical kit. Obviously, someone had alerted her to my guest's condition, or she had seen it for herself and sprung into action. Gregor had also sensed my arrival and hurried over in his human form, carrying clothes for me. "Alpha, are you all right?" "You were gone for so long I nearly sent trackers out," Gregor said. His voice sounded worried, but I didn't miss the way he judged Grantham. I shifted into my human form, snagging a shirt from him before replying, "I'm all right, you don't need to worry." I pulled on some sweatpants, then turned to assess my mate. He looked terrible. "Can you do me a favor and grab some clothes for him?" We didn't have time to get his belongings. I lied, but Gregor didn't argue. He just jogged toward his house. "Oh, you poor thing," Carmilla cooed to my mate. She reached out to touch Grantham's thick brown fur, but he sidestepped her. I held up my hand to stop her as other pack members watched from a distance. I had been under the microscope enough for one day and wanted to make my mate comfortable. "Let's get him to my house for some privacy," I ordered. "Of course, Alpha," Carmilla said politely, ignoring my obvious hostility. Grantham gave an exhausted huff, but followed me. He seemed so lethargic that even Carmilla's presence went unnoticed, despite how much other people clearly made him anxious. I had always struggled with Carmilla's presence, and I kept a steady eye on her as we moved inside and Grantham collapsed onto the living room floor. There was truly nothing wrong with her. She was an intelligent, beautiful woman and a powerful doctor who always had the pack's best interests at heart. That was exactly why I found her presence so difficult. She was exactly what I was supposed to be, the ideal image of a Luna. But I pushed those thoughts aside when Grantham let out a painful whimper, jerking his hind leg away from her. "He has several issues, but they are fixable," Carmilla said carefully. "He's far too thin for his build. He needs to be fed as soon as possible, and he's quite dehydrated." We caught it early enough to avoid permanent damage. As for his injuries, he'll be in pain for a while, but everything should heal properly. Before she left, I asked for a list of foods and ways to make him comfortable. She was happy to help and told me to call her if anything odd happened. I intended to. His well-being was now my priority. Everything else could wait. Gregor returned just as Carmilla left, his arms loaded with clothing. I took a shirt and shorts for Grantham, who was struggling to stay awake. "Can you shift so we can get you into bed?" I asked gently. Grantham barely lifted his head. When his eyes closed, I thought he'd fallen asleep, but then the sounds of the shift began. A few minutes later, my mate lay on the carpet, too tired to even be bothered by his lack of clothing. I decided clothes would be too much of a struggle for him right now. He could barely keep his eyes open. With Gregor's help, I moved him to the couch and placed a thick, fuzzy blanket over him to keep him warm. "What did Carmilla say?" Gregor asked, looking at Grantham's thin frame. "Everything is fixable. He just needs food and rest," I replied, though a knot of worry remained in my stomach. I left Grantham to sleep and headed to the kitchen. Carmilla said he needed protein and carbohydrates, food to put some weight on his bones. I worried that after eating so little for so long, his body would struggle with digestion. I started slow with water, which was a struggle in itself. I felt terrible waking him, but I didn't want the dehydration to worsen. I gently roused him, slipped my arms under his head to prop him up, and held a glass to his lips. He drank enough to satisfy me for now. I wasn't much of a cook, but I knew the basics of a werewolf's diet. As Grantham slept, I pulled out pans and pots that were nearly new. "So, is he your mate?" Gregor asked, sitting on a bar stool and watching me closely. "Yes," I answered curtly, not looking up as I placed salmon into a hot pan. "You don't sound happy about finding the person you've dreamed of." I sighed, shredding ginger into the pan and checking the brown rice. I was overwhelmed, but Gregor's directness was forcing my emotions to the surface. "He's not an alpha," I said, my voice cracking. "He's not what I dreamed of at all. And he can't even talk." When I told the other pack he was my mate, they practically laughed at me. I couldn't even blame them. A tear of disappointment rolled down my cheek. Gregor astonished me by rolling his eyes. "I can't believe you actually thought you were going to get an alpha for a mate." "What do you mean?" I sniffed. "That's how it's supposed to be. A strong leader gets a strong mate." Gregor crossed his arms. "And the firstborn of an alpha and Luna is supposed to be a male heir. That same heir is supposed to have a powerful childhood friend for a beta, instead of just picking a random wolf like me." I ran my fingers through my hair. "That's different." "No, you're different," Gregor countered. "In this pack, we do things differently. And whether you like it or not, that man is your mate." Chapter 7. 2 weeks had passed since Grantham's arrival, and for those 2 weeks, Gregor's words sat heavily on my chest. The truth was that Grantham kept proving him right, over and over again. I was different from other alphas, and this pack was different from the hundreds of others across the globe. I would be damned if my own mate was plain or exactly what I had been wishing for all along. There was no way the moon goddess would allow that. But Grantham was something I never thought would happen to me. I didn't even think a man like him could exist in my world, and I was equally frustrated and fascinated. At first, everything was as normal as it could be with an Omega who didn't utter a word. I fed him every morning and every night, making sure his body got what it was craving. I made sure he drank plenty of water and had tea whenever he wanted. Though his wolf and his human side were still thin, I made sure he left the house once a day for a walk. He slept most of the day in the guest bedroom, and I kept everyone away except for Gregor and Carmilla. But Grantham stayed far away from me too. As much as I was confused and angry about the choice, I couldn't fight the pull. Every time I saw him, my heart would flutter, yet he casually ignored me. When I tried to talk to him, it was as if he were deaf. If I reached out, he would move away. After only a few days, I began to worry that I was the only one feeling the bond. I found the silence incredibly hurtful, but those emotions were multiplied when I came down the stairs one morning and heard a low, rough masculine voice singing along to a pop song. At first, I thought it was Gregor, but then I felt the chills down my spine. I knew I had been lied to. "You can talk," I screamed, stomping down the stairs. Grantham whirled around so quickly that his water spilled all over the floor. His green eyes were wide with horror. I didn't blame him for being scared. I was in pajama shorts with wild hair, but I was still an alpha. My eyes were filled with fire, and I moved until I was directly in front of him. "I heard you singing." "I know you can talk," I barked. "Vyanatha," he began. "Alpha Vyanatha," I snapped. "I'm the alpha here. For weeks I've been trying to make you feel at home and taking care of you, and you didn't even have the decency to tell me you can actually talk? Do you know how much easier this could have been if you just told me what hurt, or that you needed the doctor, or where you got all these scars?" I ran my hands through my hair in frustration. I should have been thrilled to finally hear him, but I had spent so much time away from pack business to care for him, and he hadn't even uttered a simple thank you. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you," he whispered. I could hear the hoarseness in his voice. He lowered his head in a slight act of submission. His vocal cords were clearly out of practice. He took a swig of water to soothe the scratchiness. Watching this, I immediately felt a pang of guilt. The residual fear in his expression made it stronger. I hadn't meant to frighten him. I had just gotten overexcited. "I didn't mean to scare you," I murmured, my voice softening. "I guess I just accepted that you weren't ever going to talk to me." Hearing you say something. I couldn't control myself. Grantham gave me a tiny smile. It was the first I had ever seen from him, and it made my heart skip. "It's all right. I guess after you being so kind to me, I should have told you." The raspiness of his voice made me want him to rest, but he continued anyway. "I just didn't know how or when to tell you. My old pack was certain I couldn't speak at all, and they already told you that. I figured you would be mad." "I'm so sorry." I got ahead of myself, I soothed. "I guess you didn't talk much in your old pack." Grantham let out a sad sigh. "Sometimes it's just easier not to talk." My heart clenched. In that moment, we didn't need words. I closed my eyes, wrapped my arms around my mate to pull him into a steady embrace, and held him close to offer the comfort he'd been denied for so long. I tried not to think about the horrible things he might have endured. I just wanted to chase the hurt away. Surprisingly, Grantham didn't pull away. He slid his arms around my waist and pulled me closer, pressing his face against my shoulder as the tension finally began to leave his body. I thought I could stay in that moment forever. But then, it was as if a switch went off. He pulled away. A barrier went up in his green eyes, and the stiffness returned to his muscles. That delicate moment of vulnerability was broken. My heart ached as my mate turned his back and walked away without looking back. The moon goddess was trying to kill me. I was sure of it. Chapter 8. Part of me prayed that Grantham would change dramatically after our encounter. I hoped that because I knew he could speak, he would use his voice more often, and we would start acting like real mates. I thought we would go for walks around the parkland, and I would show him the empire I had fought for. At this point, I wasn't concerned about who would rule. I just wanted to know that my mate actually wanted a life with me. But none of that happened. In fact, my outburst seemed to drive Grantham further into a shell, and for the next month, I struggled. My wolf was desperate just to see her mate. I didn't need pet names. I just needed to see a little admiration in his eyes, a tiny smile, anything to let me know I was desirable. I got nothing. Grantham spent most of his time hidden away. Even though I was desperate for contact, I didn't push him. I didn't want to drive him to a breaking point. But my wolf had had enough. When I woke, all I saw was darkness. I was exhausted, but I couldn't focus on sleep because the second I breathed in, I felt a fire ignite within me. It was an unsettling heat that began to spread through my system. A restless energy took hold of me, a fevered pull of the bond that I couldn't ignore. It was an undeniable biological calling, making my heart race as I sought the one person who could calm this internal storm. I moved restlessly against the sheets. It took several minutes in my muddled state to realize the intensity of the fated bond was reaching its peak. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who felt it. After a few minutes, I heard my bedroom door slowly creak open. Vyanatha. The voice didn't belong to Gregor. It sent chills down my spine. It was Grantham. I didn't respond. I just closed my eyes, adoring the feeling of his presence. In that moment, I didn't care about rank. I just wanted him there. The bond. "It's calling," he rasped, his voice rough. I felt my breath hitch. I loved hearing his voice. I could hear his heavy breathing as he took hesitant steps toward my bed. I knew he was trying to fight his instincts. I was surrendering to the link between us. He knew only he could provide the peace I needed, and his wolf wasn't going to let him walk away this time. Still, his advances were slower than any other wolf I had heard about. He was fighting to keep his wolf in check. "I really shouldn't be here," he muttered. I challenged him in the dark. "Then leave," I whispered. "If you can't handle the strength of an alpha mate, then go." I knew my words would provoke him. My plan succeeded. In less than a second, Grantham was there, his presence overwhelming as he closed the distance between us to stop my words. "What did you say?" he hissed, his hand steadying my face. "I said you're not strong enough to handle an alpha like me," I gasped, the pull of the bond making me reach for him. The connection was intense, a fevered frenzy I couldn't stop. Grantham let out a low sound and moved closer. "I'm your mate. I can do more than just handle someone like you," he hissed back. I whispered in agreement. "Then don't leave me," I pleaded. "Stay." And just like that, the delicate moment shattered. "Oh my God," he gasped, suddenly pulling away. I heard him stumble across the dark floor. What am I thinking? "Grantham, please," I begged, still desperate for the bond to be settled. "No, Vyanatha," he said, reaching the door. "Not like this." And then he was gone. Chapter 9. "Your love life is more interesting than I anticipated," Gregor said with a soft laugh, steam rising from his morning coffee. I rolled my eyes, scrubbing the dishes with a bit more force than necessary. I wasn't actually furious with my beta. Gregor was just being Gregor. All my simmering frustration was reserved for one person, Grantham. You went into heat and he didn't even claim the bond? Hell, he didn't even mark you. Gregor chuckled, leaning against the counter. When my mate went into heat, the entire world stopped. I couldn't even make it into the office the next day, remember? I remember, I replied, drying a plate with a sharp snap of the towel. I remembered it vividly. Gregor, usually the most punctual and driven wolf in the pack, had sounded completely undone over the phone, lovesick and devoted. At the time, I'd envied that. I wanted a mate to soften my edges, someone to stand by my side as I led. But Grantham? Grantham was just raising my hackles and making my head spin. I don't get it, Gregor continued, his tone turning serious. To walk away during a heat, either his wolf is suppressed or his human side is incredibly stubborn. I don't know what's going on with him. He won't speak to me. I sighed, finally turning to face him. The pack is restless, Gregor. If we don't bond soon, other alphas will sense the friction. They'll see it as a crack in our foundation, an invitation for a challenge. Gregor's eyes locked with mine, his voice dropping an octave. You let me worry about the borders. Our people respect you. They can wait. You focus on your mate. The rest will fall into place. I snorted. Gregor had it easy. His bond had been natural, a perfect puzzle piece. He didn't have to balance the weight of a pack against a mate who looked at him like a stranger. Right. Because if I just ignore my responsibilities, the world magically fixes itself. I wasn't waiting for magic. I was settling this today. I found Grantham where he usually was, the guest room. I'd never paid much attention to the decor before, but standing in the doorway now, I felt a pang of guilt. It was stark white and clinical, a room for a transient guest, not a partner. My mate was supposed to be in my quarters, waking me with the scent of pine and rain, not tucked away in this clean prison cell. We need to talk, I stated, crossing my arms. Grantham lowered his book slowly. His voice was still rough, a remnant of the trauma he'd endured before I found him. I suppose we do. Do you want to reject the bond? I asked. My voice remained steady, even though my heart was hammering against my ribs. No, Grantham replied instantly. Of course not. Then why did you leave me last night? I demanded. Grantham sighed, a sound of pure exasperation that made my blood boil. Listen, Vyanatha, you wouldn't understand. Can we just leave it for now? I blinked, stunned by his sudden boldness. This wasn't the broken man I'd rescued from that abusive pack. Excuse me? I brought you here. I've ensured you're fed, safe, and healing. You owe me an explanation as to why you're rejecting our nature. Grantham stood up, his height finally matching mine as he stepped into my space. The air in the small room grew heavy with static. I said, "Leave it, Vianatha," he growled, the sound vibrating in the air. "I am the alpha of this pack. I don't leave things," I shouted, my patience finally snapping. "I won't be dismissed in my own home." "You're so focused on being an alpha," he scoffed, his eyes flashing with a sudden, defiant fire as he moved toward the door. "You're so busy trying to command everyone that you've forgotten how to actually connect. You want a soldier, not a mate." That was the spark. My wolf, already restless from the unmated heat, roared to the surface. She didn't see an opponent. She saw her missing half, and she was done being ignored. "What did you say?" I snarled. The shift happened in a blur of motion and instinct. I didn't think. I let the wolf take the lead. In seconds, the human argument was gone, replaced by the raw, primal energy of the pack. I lunged, my weight carrying us both to the floor. He didn't fight me with malice, but his hands gripped my fur as we tumbled, his breath hitching in surprise. My wolf didn't want him hurt, she wanted him marked. She wanted the world to know he was ours. Ignoring his protests, I leaned down, the scent of him overwhelming my senses. With a low, possessive rumble, I claimed the spot where his shoulder met his neck, sinking my teeth in just deep enough to seal the bond. It wasn't an act of war, it was an act of absolute, undeniable claim. Chapter 10. The metallic tang of the bond, electric and overwhelming, filled my senses as the primal rush of the shift began to recede. Grantham lay beneath me, his chest heaving as he gasped for air, his eyes wide with the shock of the sudden connection. My wolf felt a surge of absolute triumph. The man who had dared to challenge her authority was now irrevocably tied to us. Yet, even in the heat of her victory, the protective instinct of the mate bond began to soften her jagged edges. "Vianatha." A sharp gasp cut through the silence of the room. It was Carmilla. "Oh my God, Vianatha, back away. You're hurting him." The sound of my mate's name on her lips sparked a fresh ember of jealousy, but the sight of Carmilla, her head lowered in a sign of submission even as she stood her ground, stilled my wolf's predatory pacing. She was a doctor, and she was protecting her patient, even against her alpha. "Vianatha, that's enough." Gregor appeared in the doorway, his voice a steady, immovable anchor. My second-in-command didn't flinch. "The point is made. Shift back. Now." I let out one final, low rumble of warning before the human part of me took hold. The transition was a blur of heat and aching muscles. I reached for one of Grantham's discarded shirts, pulling it on hastily as the adrenaline began to drain, leaving me cold. Grantham was sitting up now, his hand pressed firmly against the side of his neck. The skin there wasn't just wounded, it was pulsing with a faint, silver light. The mark wasn't a jagged scar, but a shimmering brand of ownership that was already weaving itself into his very heartbeat. "You've done enough." "It's over," Gregor said, his voice softening as he skillfully guided Carmilla toward the door. "But he's hurt. He needs help." Carmilla protested, her voice bordering on frantic. "He's fine, Carmilla," Gregor soothed, his hand on her shoulder. "It's the nature of the bond. When two strong-willed souls collide, the claim can be intense." Vianatha wasn't trying to break him, she was claiming him. "Look, he's already healing." I barely heard them leave. My entire world had narrowed down to the man on the floor. I had actually done it. I had marked him. "You weren't supposed to do that," Grantham whispered. His voice was steady, but I saw the shimmer of unshed tears in his eyes. The alpha facade he'd been wearing minutes ago had vanished, leaving behind the man I'd rescued, vulnerable, quiet, and deeply shaken. "Well, I did," I said, my voice sounding more solid than I felt. I stepped closer, my heart heavy with a sudden, sharp regret. "Is there a problem with that?" "You were supposed to reject me," he breathed, the words so low they were almost a plea. I froze, the air leaving my lungs. What? Why would you want that? A rejection would shatter us both. It leads to nothing but darkness. I know, Grantham mumbled, rubbing his face with trembling hands. But I thought you didn't want me. My own pack threw me away like I was nothing. Why would a powerful alpha like you want an omega? The frustration that had fueled my wolf evaporated, replaced by a dull ache. So this whole act, the insults, the defiance, it was all to force me to cast you out? I thought it would be easier for you if you hated me, he confessed, looking down at his hands. But now, I can feel you. The bond is already deepening. I can't shut you out anymore. I walked toward the door, needing the cold air of the hallway to clear the scent of cedar and storm clouds from my head. I was never going to reject you, Grantham. You being an omega doesn't change what the moon goddess decided. It doesn't change that you're mine. You can't tell me you didn't dream of a big, powerful alpha mate, he called out just as I reached the threshold. I paused, glancing over my shoulder with a small, tired smile. I did, but the moon goddess chose you for me and me for you. I trust her judgment. She doesn't make mistakes. Chapter 11. Interactions between Grantham and me became tense over the next few days. I knew he could feel the pull of the bond more strongly now that I had marked him, but he was forcing himself not to act on it. I often wondered how much it would take for him to simply give in to the pull. Most males would have already claimed their mates and settled the bond. I wasn't particularly prepared for a child, but at least formally introducing him to the pack would have been nice. Clearly, he wasn't ready for that to happen anytime soon. Still, I let him have some space. I won't lie, I became a little more invasive, wanting to know how his days were going or if he needed anything. I knew that my mark was more than just a scar on his neck. Prior to being marked, he would have felt a strong attraction to me, maybe some desire, and a slight need for my companionship. Now, everything was heightened. He wouldn't just want to be around me, he would need to see me. The urge to complete the bond should have been nearly irresistible. As Gregor said, I was far from normal, and it wouldn't be right if my mate and the bonding process were normal. If he needed a little time and space after my rash actions, then I would try my damnedest to give him some room. To keep myself out of the house, I decided to go for a stroll around the park grounds. Once I had become alpha, I made it my mission to assure my members that their voices were heard and I was not a tyrant. I spoke to children, greeted homemakers, chatted with warriors, and checked in with my omegas. Today, I decided to spend a little more time with my omegas. I suppose seeing how badly Grantham had been treated made me worried about their well-being. Yes, they were at the bottom of the pack hierarchy, but they were still pack members. Their rank didn't mean they weren't people or that they weren't important. The omegas all treated me with wonderful hospitality, and the children were all polite. I made sure none of the homes they lived in were damaged and that everyone was content. Even when I stumbled upon the Omega in charge of training warrior pups, everything seemed well. He wasn't their punching bag, he acted more as an instructor, and I could not be more relieved. Maybe I wasn't the best alpha, and maybe some of my pack members were disappointed that I was not a man, but at least everyone in my pack was treated with dignity. Hell, even when I came across Carmilla, I gave her a respectful apology and told her a couple of lies to convince her that my wolf had gone into a protective mentality over our mate. Carmilla accepted my apology with a bright smile, even though I knew she could sense my slight irritation. Yes, she was a wonderful woman with an honest heart and kind eyes. To most people, she would be nearly impossible to hate. But I knew that everyone wanted her to be Luna. Everyone had been hoping that when my mother was pregnant with what they assumed was a boy, that child would be mated to this girl who already showed signs of being a tender leader. And then I was born a girl and ruined the expectation. Even if it wasn't her fault, I still felt a flicker of resentment because I might have been an alpha, but I was still petty occasionally. After I had walked my rounds and checked in with almost everyone, I figured it was time to shift. The last time my wolf had been out was the incident in the bedroom. But now Grantham was far away, and my wolf was more content than she had been in a long time. Once I was in the cover of the trees, I shifted. Being in my wolf form felt lovely. It had been so long since I could hear the birds fluttering in the trees and inhale the earthy smell of the grass. I might have been human more than wolf, but the woods would always be my home. Today, I was going exploring. There was hardly anything around my pack lands, no sparkling lakes or mountain tops, but it was the perfect place for a wolf to be. Here, other animals frolicked just as freely as we did. I was surrounded by deer, rabbits, and foxes. My wolf raced through the forest, nose to the ground, sniffing out every scent she could find. Once tracking got boring, I found a small clearing and rolled onto my back. I felt like a pup, and I knew I looked like one, but it was so nice to just wiggle around on the forest floor like I did when I was younger. After a few minutes, I figured it was time to release the rest of my wolf's energy and return home. I had already spent most of my day outside, and by the time I made it back, it would be dinner time anyway. I pushed my wolf into a sprint and raced along the edge of my border until I reached the center of my packlands and, finally, my own home. Right outside my door, I hesitated. Normally, I would be okay with shifting and walking around my own home until I felt like putting on clothes, but now it was different. Now Grantham was in there. For a split second, I considered just walking in anyway. Perhaps it would entice him enough to complete the bond. But then I remembered being trapped in my heat. I remembered begging him to stay with me and his stark rejection of my advances. As much as I hated to admit it, his rejection had humiliated me more than I thought possible. I wasn't going to let that happen twice. I walked up to the front door and carefully used my mouth to twist the doorknob. It was difficult, but I eventually got the door open and slowly crept into the mudroom. I could sense that Grantham was in the house, but I wasn't able to tell where. I assumed he would be tucked in his room like usual. I found out I was wrong rather quickly. He was snuggled up on the couch in the living room, watching television. Then, in a second, he was on his feet, and the blankets he had been using were discarded on the floor. Vyanatha. He was shocked by my presence, and he looked terrified. I figured my last outburst in wolf form had instilled some fear in him. How did you get in here? I couldn't reply, and I knew I should have kept my distance to make him feel comfortable. But unlike him, I didn't have much restraint, and my wolf lowered her head and gave in to the pull by taking slow steps toward him. Grantham's eyes flicked around, trying to find an escape route, and when he found none, he simply sat back down on the sofa. He was trying to act like he wasn't afraid, but also like he didn't want to challenge me. My wolf didn't lash out. Instead, when she saw Grantham sit down, her eyes moved to the open spot on the couch beside him. Without hesitation, she leapt onto the couch right beside her mate and tucked her legs underneath her. The human part of me was horrified. I was filthy from my run and splayed out over my expensive leather sofa, acting like a lapdog in front of my mate. I thought I was supposed to be a dominant, proud alpha, and yet here I was with my head in Grantham's lap and my tail wagging. I was frustrated with my wolf and tried to mentally persuade her to get off the couch. I tried to overpower her instincts or bribe her with another run. But then I felt a spark under my skin when a gentle, wary hand brushed against the fur on the top of my head. All of my desperation to get away died as contentment flooded my body. Chapter 12. At first, Grantham was very gentle, and my wolf was shocked by his advances. The tips of his fingers hardly brushed the surface of my fur, as if he feared I would lash out, but I was too surprised to even move. When I stayed perfectly still, his touch became bolder. He began playing with my ears, scratching my neck and ruffling my coat. As much as I had tried to prevent my wolf from acting like a lapdog, I couldn't help but love this. If I had been a cat, I would have been purring. Instead, my tail simply thudded against the leather of the couch. Small whimpers escaped me whenever he stopped. I don't know how long this continued, but eventually my eyes shut of their own accord. For the first time, I fell asleep beside my mate, listening to his breathing and feeling his hands in my fur. My sleep was peaceful, calmer than it had been in years. When I woke up, I had shifted back to human form and was splayed across the couch. Embarrassed, I gasped and quickly wrapped a blanket around myself. A second later, I realized the room was empty. The only company was the bright sun streaming through the windows. I must have slept through the entire night. I headed upstairs to my bedroom. After a quick shower, I stood in my closet and hesitated before grabbing my best-fitting hoodie and my cleanest pair of jeans. Subconsciously, I knew I was trying to look good for Grantham, but the reflection in the mirror was disappointing. My clothes were versatile, but they were also very frumpy. So, I did something I never thought I would do. An hour later, I was being dragged around the mall by a very excited Carmilla. "I can't believe you asked me to come shopping with you," she gushed. "You don't seem like the shopping type. I think you've worn the same clothes since you became alpha." She giggled. "You must want to look good for Grantham, isn't it?" "Yeah," I admitted. I tried to look bored when we entered a store filled with dresses and blouses, but I was having a difficult time holding back. It had been ages since I had gone shopping for something I actually wanted to wear. "You're so lucky to have a man like Grantham," Carmilla said dreamily. She pulled out a black dress, held it against me, then shook her head and placed it back on the rack. "Lucky," I scoffed. "He's terrified of me." I regretted the words the instant they were out. I had always been private, and telling Carmilla about my personal life felt wrong. I was her leader, not her friend. Carmilla, however, didn't seem to mind. "He doesn't hate you," she said finally. "You just intimidate him." "Please, how could I intimidate him? Since he's gotten here, I've been a mess. I'll be surprised if he doesn't challenge my position." Carmilla scoffed. "He's an Omega. You have royal blood. He would be a fool to challenge you. And even if he could beat you, he still wouldn't be the leader. Our pack respects you, Vianatha. They follow you alone. Things may not have started out perfectly, but I spent a lot of time with him while he was healing. I think he admires you. You are a headstrong alpha who took over the pack, and he was the punching bag for his old people. I'm a doctor, and even I would struggle if my mate turned out to be as powerful as you. But I'm still a mess," I argued. She laughed and began loading her arms with clothes. "Then let's make you a hot mess." There were days when I resented Carmilla for being so perfect, but today was not one of them. She was shaping up to be a lovely friend. She was patient and kind, and I understood even more why others saw her as a natural leader. Once my car was full of bags, we headed back. After I dropped her off, I went straight home and was stopped by a heavenly scent when I walked through the front door. "What are you making?" I asked, seeing Grantham at the stove. "French toast," Grantham replied, looking up timidly. "It's not exactly a dinner food," I said with a chuckle. "But it is my favorite." He gave me a small smile. "I know. Gregor told me, and I figured you wouldn't want to cook after your day out." I felt my heart melting. "Grantham, that's so sweet of you." He shrugged. "You opened your home to me and took good care of me. I felt like I had to repay you somehow." "Don't be ridiculous. You're my mate. What's mine is yours. But I wouldn't mind if you cooked me French toast every day." I hurried upstairs to put my new things away, my heart warming at the gesture. My mate was finally coming around. I bounded back down to the kitchen just as Grantham was setting 2 plates on the island. "I can't believe you made all of this," I murmured as I sat down. My plate was piled high with berries, whipped cream, and syrup. "It looks wonderful." Grantham began to eat, then spoke after swallowing. "You've been so kind to me, Vianatha. You didn't even have to let me stay here. You've been a blessing, and I'm sorry I've made this so hard for you." He paused, then added, "But I'm glad you like the food." "Thank you," I whispered. "That means a lot to me." We ate in a comfortable silence. Once the plates were cleared, a bit of the old awkwardness returned. "Well, I guess I should go to bed," Grantham said with a tense shrug. "Grantham," I said, reaching for his arm. He flinched slightly at the touch, but I pressed on. "I don't want you sleeping in the guest room." "Oh." I swallowed hard. "It's not right for you to be down there in those conditions. It's dingy." "I don't mind it," he countered. I shook my head, frustrated. Finally, I just blurted it out. "I want you to stay with me. I want you in my bed." Chapter 13. "Not for that," I blurted, mortified by how my words must have sounded in the quiet of the kitchen. Grantham let out a genuine, low chuckle at my sudden panic. "I kind of figured you wouldn't be quite so forward about seducing me, Vianatha." "So, what do you say?" I encouraged, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had put my pride on the line. The first rejection had been crushing enough, and I wasn't sure I could handle a second round of being turned away. Grantham's slight smile faltered, and he glanced at the floor, suddenly uncertain. It was as if he had retreated behind his old, guarded walls in a matter of seconds. I worried I had pushed too hard, too fast. We had worked so hard to find the scrap of common ground, and losing it now felt devastating. "That's a big step, Vayanatha," he murmured, his voice barely a breath. "It's just for the night, I promised," softening my tone. "You can stay as far on your side of the bed as you want." "Honestly, I don't care. It's just, my wolf is restless. I don't think I'll find any peace tonight without you nearby." Grantham let out a long, weary sigh. "Vayanatha, please, Grantham. Just this once. If it's uncomfortable, I won't ask you again." He shifted his weight, looking at me with those guarded green eyes before finally giving a stiff, hesitant nod. "Fine, but just for tonight." I didn't argue. A victory was a victory. I led the way upstairs, my wary mate following in my shadow. "This is my room," I said awkwardly, pushing the door open. I watched his expression as he took it in. I wasn't a tyrant, but I lived with the comforts an alpha status provided: the plush carpets, the heavy furniture, the sheer expanse of the suite. For an omega like Grantham, who had spent his life in the margins of a cruel pack, it must have looked like another world. I felt a sudden, strange pang of self-consciousness about my own privilege as he looked from the bed to the walk-in closet. "The door by the closet leads to a bathroom," I said, breaking the silence. "If you want to wash up before turning in." "Oh, okay. That sounds good," he mumbled, shuffling toward the door and clicking the lock behind him. While the water ran, I went in my closet, stumped. I usually slept in a ratty t-shirt, but tonight felt different. I wanted a delicate balance, something that made me feel like a woman, not just a commander, but nothing that would make him feel pressured. I settled on a simple, soft pajama set and climbed into bed. I picked up a book, pretending to read, so I wouldn't look like I was hovering. When the shower finally stopped and Grantham emerged, the air in the room seemed to vanish. He was dressed for sleep, his damp hair messy and his lean frame backlit by the hallway light. The bond between us hummed, a low-frequency vibration that made my pulse jump. The attraction was undeniable. He wasn't built like the massive warriors of my pack, but there was a quiet, captivating strength in the way he moved. "Which side should I take?" he asked, his voice low. "Whichever you prefer," I replied, my voice sounding a bit breathier than I intended. He sat on the edge of the mattress, every muscle in his back corded with tension. He looked like a coiled spring. I couldn't stand seeing him so guarded in a place that was supposed to be a sanctuary. "Grantham," I whispered, setting my book aside. "You're so tense. Let me help you relax." He looked like he was about to decline, so I moved slowly, giving him every chance to pull away. I sat behind him, my hands hovering for a second before I placed them gently on his shoulders. I was rewarded with a long, shuddering sigh as his head dropped forward. I worked through the knots in his muscles, making sure my touch was firm but soothing. Gradually, the tension melted away. When he finally leaned back, eyes heavy with sleep, I helped him settle against the pillows. "Rest," I whispered. I knew I should stay on my side, but the magnetism of the bond was a physical force. I shifted closer, resting my head near his shoulder, the scent of him, pine and rain, finally calming my mind. I lightly brushed my hand against his arm, and instead of pulling away, he let out a soft sound of contentment, finally drifting off into a deep, peaceful sleep beside me. Chapter 14. I woke to a world that felt far too bright and a heart that beat far too fast. I had assumed that having my mate near me while I slept would allow my body to finally settle, that the proximity would act as a balm to the restless energy of the past few weeks. After all, that was the promise of the bond. But by now, I was foolish for thinking any part of my journey with Grantham would follow a normal path. When I opened my eyes, the air in the room felt thick, charged with an electric tension that made my skin hum. It wasn't just a physical need, it was as if the mark on my neck was a live wire, pulsing in sync with the man beside me. My wolf was no longer content with a truce. She was demanding acknowledgement. The bond was no longer a quiet hum, it was a roar. Grantham, I rasped, my throat dry. My hand searched the mattress for him, and when my fingers finally brushed against his arm, a jolt of pure, raw recognition sparked through my core. I know, he whispered, his own voice thick and strained. I feel the pull, Vianatha. It's overwhelming. Don't leave, I breathed, the vulnerability of the moment stripping away my alpha pride. My body felt like it was caught in a fever, one that only he could break. I can't find peace without you. I can't stay, Grantham argued, though his voice lacked conviction. I heard the rustle of the sheets as he pulled away, the loss of his warmth hitting me like a physical blow. Grantham, please. I'm asking you to stay, I panted, my hands clenching the fabric of the bed. I need you here. I don't want to do this just because the bond is forcing us, Vianatha, he protested, finally getting to his feet and standing in the shadows of the room. We've barely had a real moment yet. I don't want you to wake up and feel like the instinct was the only thing that brought us together. I couldn't argue with his logic, even as my wolf whimpered in frustration. My skin felt like it was on fire, but the alpha in me wouldn't beg a third time. If he didn't want me, if he didn't trust what we were building, then I would face this storm on my own. Then go, I managed to say, turning my back to him. And he did. My mate left me for the second time, leaving me to battle the intensity of the bond in the silence of my room. The hours that followed were a blur of restless energy. I could smell his scent in the air, pine and rain, and I could sense him pacing downstairs, a mirrored reflection of my own agitation. My wolf was furious at the distance, driving waves of longing through me that made sleep impossible. I was drenched in sweat, exhausted by the sheer effort of holding myself together. Just as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, I heard the door creak open. The scent of my mate hit me full force, grounding me instantly. I told you to leave, I whispered, not turning around. No, you need me, and I can't stay away. It's driving me crazy, he said softly, the click of the door latch echoing in the quiet room. You walked away 2 hours ago, I snapped, trying to hide how desperately I wanted him to close the distance between us. You don't get to change your mind now. Grantham's laugh was hoarse and lacked any humor. I want you, Vianatha. I want you so badly I can hardly stand to be in the same room as you most days. I didn't walk away because I didn't want you. I walked away because I didn't want to take advantage of the fever. I wanted to make sure you were choosing me, not just the bond. I turned then, meeting his gaze in the dim light. I want you, Grantham. I wanted you last night before the bond even flared up. I've wanted the man who stood up to me in the kitchen and the man who made me French toast. You're my mate. The bond simply makes it impossible to pretend otherwise. So this isn't just the fever talking, he asked, stepping toward the bed. No, it's me talking, I promised. Grantham let out a long, shaky breath. Seconds later, the weight of the mattress shifted as he lay down beside me. He reached out, pulling me into a firm, protective embrace that felt like coming home after a lifetime at sea. As we stayed there, locked in each other's arms, the restless fire finally settled into a steady, warm glow. We finally allowed the bond to take hold, weaving our lives together in the quiet of the night. Chapter 15. Are you sure you're okay with this? Grantham asked, his voice a low, steady rumble in the quiet of the room. You have no idea how badly I've wanted this, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. I didn't want another moment of doubt or another wall between us. I leaned in, pressing my lips to the mark I had left on his neck, the brand of our shared destiny. His body shuddered instantly, a quiet sound of surprise and surrender escaping him. I rolled onto my side, my insecurities finally melting away as I pressed closer to him. The heat of the bond was intoxicating, a magnetic pull that made every other thought vanish. I want you so badly, he hissed, his voice thick with a sudden, possessive edge I hadn't heard before. It wasn't the voice of the broken man I'd rescued, it was the voice of a mate claiming his place. I'm all yours, I breathed back. Grantham let out a low growl at my words, his hands moving to my shoulders the second they were out of my mouth. With a newfound confidence that startled me, he guided me back against the pillows. Do you trust me? He asked, hovering over me, his green eyes dark with intensity. I didn't need to think. I simply nodded. Then stay with me, he ordered softly, his fingers tangling in my hair. Having him this close while the bond was so active felt like standing in the center of a storm. Grantham's hands were slightly shaky at first, but as he traced the lines of my arms and shoulders, they grew steady and intentional. Every point of contact felt like a spark, a silent promise that the distance between us was finally gone. When he leaned down, his warmth enveloping me, I felt the world outside our room simply cease to exist. He moved with a slow, deliberate rhythm, tracing the contours of my skin with a reverence that made my heart ache. I moved with him, desperate for the connection, my weight pinned comfortably against the mattress by his presence. Vianatha, Grantham murmured against my skin, his voice vibrating with an intensity that made me tremble. There's no turning back from this. I want to be yours. Fully. I don't want to turn back, I breathed, arching toward the contact. The night blurred into a series of overwhelming sensations. The weight of his presence, the soft rustle of the sheets, and the undeniable pull of the moon goddess's design. We moved together in a harmony dictated by the bond, a slow and steady climb toward a peace I hadn't known was possible. As the intensity peaked, the fire that had been burning within me finally broke, replaced by a wave of pure, shimmering calm. The restlessness that had plagued me for weeks vanished, leaving me drifting in a state of total, blissful silence. No more, I managed to mumble, the exhaustion of the bond finally hitting me like a physical weight. I've got you, Grantham whispered. He pulled a thin sheet over us both and settled behind me, his arm draping over my waist to pull me close, anchoring me to him. Do you need anything? I asked, my voice slurred with sleepiness. I'm exactly where I want to be, V, he whispered into my hair. Just sleep. Chapter 16. Morning came easily this time. I wasn't sure if I should credit my wonderful sleep to the exhaustion from our night together or to my mate, who actually stayed with me. Either way, it didn't matter. I felt better than I had in months, and waking up with Grantham's arms around me was enough to make my heart flutter. I rolled over so my face was pressed against his chest and breathed in his scent. If we made sleeping together a habit, I would definitely become a morning person. Hey, Grantham said, startling me slightly. Morning, I murmured, nuzzling him. He sucked in a breath, as if he loved the contact, and tightened his hold. How are you? He asked, sounding a little wary. I purred. I'm really great after last night. I'd even go as far as saying I can't wait for the next time. Grantham let out a sigh. So you aren't mad at me? I told you that you could. I wasn't lying when I said I wanted you from the first day I saw you. I appreciate that you want to be respectful, but I chose you a long time ago, okay? His arms tightened around me, pulling me closer to his body. I'm glad. I'd feel awful if I thought I took advantage of you. I'm definitely not mad, I whispered, moving up so I could give him a kiss. Those gorgeous green eyes locked onto mine as I neared him, but at the last second, he turned away. I want you, I really do, but I'm worried about rushing things. I know if I let you kiss me and we stay in this bed, we're going to do a lot more than what I'm comfortable with right now, Grantham rambled nervously. Okay, I said. I felt a little dejected. I wanted to expand on our relationship now that the ice was broken. But he had respected my boundaries, and if I'm being honest, I had been the one pushing the issue. If he needed a day to get his head on straight, that's what he would get. Can I actually ask you a favor? He questioned. Absolutely. He hesitated again, unable to meet my eyes as he scratched the back of his neck. I know it's a lot to ask, but do you think we could go to my old pack? My parents are still there, and I haven't talked to them since I left. They must be worried sick. Also, if there's anything left of my house, I wouldn't mind picking up some things. That's not a big favor at all, Grantham, I said, slightly astonished. I'm so sorry I didn't realize this before. We can leave right after we get dressed and eat. Thanks, V, Grantham said in relief. I couldn't help myself. I gave him a cheesy smile and softly repeated the nickname. Grantham appeared horrified for a moment. Oh, I mean no disrespect. Alpha Vianatha, he stuttered. I giggled. Grantham, I'm not mad. I think it's cute, and you never have to call me Alpha. You're my mate. We're equals. Despite our intimacy, Grantham changed in the bathroom while I changed in the bedroom. I chose a nice pair of jeans and a simple blouse. When Grantham emerged, I noticed he was still wearing the clothes Gregor had donated. Do you mind if we go to the mall before we see your parents? I asked. I think it's time to get you some of your own clothes. Grantham stiffened. But I don't have any money. I gave him a little smile. Don't worry about that. I'll pay for it. I can't accept that. You've already given me so much, he argued, shaking his head. Think of it as a thank you for last night, I whispered. That effectively stopped his argument and made his face flame, which I deemed a victory. I made a quick phone call to Gregor to let him know we'd be out, then called the alpha of Grantham's old pack so I wouldn't be caught trespassing. Do you want to drive? I asked, dangling my keys. Grantham looked at me, astonished, then lowered his eyes to the garage floor. We didn't have cars in my old pack. I never learned how to drive, he confessed, his cheeks turning red. I slid my hand into his. No worries. I'll teach you sometime. It's easy once you get the hang of it. The drive to the mall was quiet. Every time I tried to talk, Grantham became tense. Now that I knew he'd never driven, it was clear he wasn't used to being in a car at all. You could have told me you weren't comfortable, I said softly once we parked. Grantham just shrugged, clearly embarrassed. At first, the mall wasn't bad. It was early, so there were few shoppers. I had to practically beg Grantham to try things on, but he eventually gave in. Within 2 hours, we had a few decent outfits. I was content. I just wanted to get him a few more items. But as lunch approached, the mall became packed with people. I had no issue with the crowd, but then I felt Grantham's hand tighten around mine as he stopped moving. Come on, I said excitedly, spinning around. My giddiness died when I saw Grantham's pale face and felt his hands trembling. Grantham? He didn't reply, his eyes looking glazed over. Grantham, I said more urgently. Can we go? He asked, his voice choked. What's wrong? He stumbled away from me, his breathing becoming rough and unpredictable. I had never seen a reaction like this, but my instincts kicked in. I grabbed his hands and pulled him toward the nearest exit, making sure we didn't run into anyone. Once we were outside in the parking lot, away from the commotion, I let go of his hands and scanned him. He was mumbling to himself, pulling at his hair. I took a step forward and slid my arms around his waist, keeping the hold loose so he wouldn't feel trapped, and leaned my head against his chest. I began running my fingers down his spine, mumbling soothing words. Oh God, Vianatha, he gasped, burying his face in my hair. It's okay. It's all right, I cooed. There were so many people in there. We're not in there anymore. It's okay. I never want to go back in there, he whispered. Then we won't, I promised. So, it was the crowd that scared you? Grantham swallowed hard and nodded. They're just humans, Grantham. They're harmless. But there were so many of them. Why didn't you tell me? I would have understood. Grantham rolled his eyes, suddenly frustrated. It's hard to know you'll be scared of something you've never experienced, he snapped. I furrowed my brow. It's a mall. Everyone goes to the mall. You've probably gone at some point. That set him off. He took a step closer, eyes narrowing. Listen, Alpha Vianatha, he mocked, not everyone is as privileged as you. Not all of us grow up as the offspring of alphas. I grew up on hand-me-downs and crumbs. I didn't get to drive cars or run to the mall to spend a fortune. I don't want to fight with you, I said evenly. I'm sorry I put you in an uncomfortable position. I didn't know you had anxiety around people. Grantham shook his head, still appearing angry. I realized he was using anger to cover his vulnerability. He wanted to feel strong, and having a panic attack made him feel weak, especially in front of me. You're brave, I blurted out. What? Grantham hissed. I think you're brave for getting into a car with me when you've never been in one. You're brave for going into a giant place you've never seen. And you're brave for wanting to go back to the pack that hurt you, just to tell your parents you're okay. Grantham seemed taken aback, simply gawking at me. You're a strong man, even if your old pack didn't let you show it. Grantham looked away, his anger replaced by shame. I saw a glimmer of tears in his eyes before he looked back. I didn't mean to take it out on you, V, he whispered. I know. You were just upset, I murmured. Just remember I'm on your side, okay? He wrapped his arms around me. Thank you. You don't know how much that means to me. Chapter 17. After some deliberation, we climbed back into the car. I'd offered to run the distance in wolf form. I knew the open forest would be easier on his nerves than a cramped vehicle, but Grantham was stubborn. He wanted to arrive with the quiet dignity of a car, even if his knuckles remained white against the seat the entire way. When we crossed the border into his old territory, I felt his entire frame lock tight. It'll be all right, I said softly, putting the car in park. They can't touch you anymore, Grantham. You're part of my pack now. You're mated to an alpha, and we protect our own. Grantham glanced at me, his expression a haunting mix of gratitude and something I couldn't quite name. He simply nodded and unbuckled his seatbelt. The pack lands were exactly as I remembered, rigid and cold. Alpha Jordache and his beta were already waiting, standing near the center of the settlement like statues of granite. Alpha Vianatha. Jordache called, a sharp, practiced smirk crossing his face. To what do we owe the pleasure of a return visit? My mate wanted to see his family, I said curtly, stepping out of the car. Well, then Jordache purred, his eyes flicking dismissively toward Grantham before returning to me. Why doesn't the lad run along to his business? You and I have more pressing matters of state to discuss. I didn't want to leave Grantham's side, but I didn't want to spark a diplomatic incident on his home turf. I gave Grantham an apologetic look. He gave me a silent, steady nod of understanding before disappearing toward the outskirts of the village. Jordache led me to a stark, modern cafe. He didn't ask for my preference. He simply ordered 2 black coffees. It was a small, transparent play for dominance that made my skin crawl. So, let's be honest, Jordache began, leaning back in the booth. You're here to find a way out of that unfortunate arrangement with the Omega. It was a fluke of nature, clearly. I nearly choked on my drink. Pardon, an alpha paired with an omega? It's a crack in the foundation, Vianatha. My warriors need strong bloodlines to maintain order. One of my lead commanders recently lost his partner, a man of high standing and impeccable rank. I'm proposing a merger. You reject the boy, take a warrior worthy of your title, and our packs become the most powerful force in the country. I slammed my cup down, the liquid sloshing over the rim. My wolf snarled just beneath the surface. Grantham is my mate by divine right, Jordache. And he is far stronger than any warrior who would agree to be traded like a piece of territory. My pack doesn't follow me because of my bloodline. They follow me because I lead with respect. Something you clearly know nothing about. I didn't wait for his reply. I bolted from the cafe, my heart thundering with indignation. I tracked Grantham's scent far past the well-kept center of the village to the very edge of the territory, where the houses looked like they were held together by nothing but faded paint and wildflowers. I stepped onto a sagging porch and pushed the door open. Grantham. Instead of my mate, I was met by 2 people who looked like echoes of him. A woman with kind, wide eyes and a man whose face was etched with the history of a long, difficult life. The moment they saw me, they dropped their heads in a gesture of absolute, terrified submission. I'm sorry, Alpha, the man whispered, his voice trembling. We didn't mean any disrespect. It broke my heart. My own Omegas looked me in the eye. They were my friends and advisors. These people lived in a permanent shadow. Vianatha? Grantham appeared from the small kitchen, his face softening the moment he saw me. He stepped between us, taking my hands in his. Are you okay? You look like you're ready to burn the forest down. I'm fine, I murmured, my voice shaking. I wanted to meet your parents. The evening was a lesson in quiet, heavy pain. Annetta and Octavian were lovely, but they were convinced that an alpha in their home meant an impending storm. I tried to tell them about our life. About how Grantham was an equal, a leader in training, but they just gave me tense, disbelieving smiles. They hadn't been worried that he was gone. They had been terrified that he had met a dark end. Seeing the crumbs they lived on and the lingering fear in their eyes, I realized Jordache hadn't just mistreated Grantham. He had tried to break an entire segment of his people. But as I looked at Grantham sitting at that rickety table, I knew Jordash had failed. Grantham hadn't broken. He'd just been waiting for someone to finally see his worth. Chapter 18. "You're distracted," Gregor pointed out, leaning against the door frame of my office. I was buried up to my neck in development plans, my mind a million miles away. I was dying to finish the day so I could see Grantham, but Alpha Jordash's words from yesterday were playing on a loop in my head. The suggestion of a political merger turned my stomach, yet the administrative needs of my pack didn't care about my personal turmoil. "No, I'm not," I countered, scribbling a signature on a zoning request. "Did you approve these?" "We need those new houses up immediately, Gregor. Quality builds, no shortcuts. I want our members in homes they can be proud of." Gregor didn't take the folder. "You can't lie to me. You've been different since we got back from that territory. If it's about what happened there, you need to deal with it. Go find Grantham. Don't even talk, just go be near him. Your wound too tight, and you're going to make mistakes on these forms." I sighed, finally dropping my pen. "Fine. 1 hour break." I looked for Grantham throughout the house, but his room was empty. A pang of worry hit me. He'd been so quiet since we visited his parents, but I decided to give him space. Gregor was right. I needed a release for my wolf's restless energy. I headed out and found Carmilla, who was more than happy to join me for a run. The forest was a sanctuary. We raced through the dappled summer light for over an hour, my wolf finally shaking off the lingering shadow of Alpha Jordash's arrogance. Carmilla was an incredible partner, fast, silent, and surprisingly resilient. When we finally returned to the house to shift back, the weight on my chest had finally lifted. We slipped into some casual clothes, a sundress for her and an oversized, comfortable tee for me, and settled in the kitchen with tea. The conversation turned to something unexpected. "I'm going to college," Vianatha, Carmilla announced, her eyes bright with a new kind of fire. I nearly dropped my mug. "College? That's incredible, Carmilla. But what brought this on?" "I love being the pack doctor, but we're a small community. I want to expand my horizons, maybe work as a teacher's aide or study advanced medicine. I want to be ready for whatever the future holds for our people." I smiled, truly proud of her independence. "You have my full permission. Pursue whatever makes you happy, Carmilla. This pack needs thinkers as much as it needs warriors." Just as we were celebrating, the front door burst open. Gregor stood there, looking pale and breathless, his eyes wide. "Vianatha, I found something. Something important." "What is it?" I asked, standing up as the atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Carmilla, sensing the gravity of Gregor's arrival, quickly gathered her things. "I should go. Thank you for the run, Alpha. We'll talk more about the school applications later." She slipped out just as Grantham walked in through the mudroom. The energy in the kitchen changed in a heartbeat. Grantham's eyes landed on me, his protective instincts flaring at the sight of me in such relaxed, post-run attire. But his focus shifted immediately to Gregor. A low, primal rumble vibrated in Grantham's chest, a warning. It wasn't malice or a threat of violence. It was the raw, territorial instinct of a mate who was finally claiming his space and his right to protect. Gregor, sensing the sudden, powerful shift in Grantham's demeanor, put his hands up in a silent gesture of respect. I need to do more research anyway," Gregor muttered, backing toward the door. "We'll talk later, Vianatha. This can wait an hour." As Gregor disappeared, I was left alone with Grantham. The mystery of Gregor's discovery would have to wait. My mate was finally standing his ground, and for the first time I saw the true, unshakable strength of the wolf inside him. Chapter 19. "You let another man see you like this?" Grantham's voice was a low, possessive rumble that seemed to vibrate the very air in the kitchen. He didn't just walk, he stalked toward me, his eyes dark with an intensity one hadn't seen before. "He's my beta, Grantham." "It's pack business," I murmured, standing my ground as he entered my space. "It's a big deal," he countered, stopping inches from me. "To me, it is." I didn't shrink back. Instead, I moved closer, wrapping my arms around his waist and pressing a soft kiss against the mark I'd left on his neck. I felt his breath hitch, his heart hammering against his ribs. "By now, you should know," I whispered against his skin, "that the only one who truly sees me is you." Grantham's hands found my waist, pulling me flush against him. He leaned down, his mouth brushing the shell of my ear, sending a shiver straight to my core. "You're making it very hard for me to stay composed, Vianatha." "Then don't," I breathed. I took his hand, guiding it to rest against my arm, letting him feel the heat of my skin and the racing pulse that matched his own. "Vianatha," he whispered, his voice husky with a sudden, raw realization. "I haven't even marked you yet. The bond, it's not sealed." I tilted my head back, exposing the line of my throat to the dim kitchen light. "Then seal it. Claim what's yours, Grantham." He didn't hesitate this time. The polite restraint he'd been clinging to for weeks finally snapped, replaced by the primal urge of a wolf finding his home. He pulled me close, one hand burying itself in my hair to tilt my head just right. When he found the sensitive skin just above my collarbone and bit down, it wasn't a wound of anger, it was a seal of destiny. A flash of white-hot heat surged through me, a sharp sting that transformed almost instantly into a shimmering sense of absolute belonging. I gasped, clinging to him as the intensity of the mark settled into my soul. "Oh God," Grantham whispered, pulling back slightly, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and worry. "Vianatha, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be so rough." "It's perfect," I said, breathless and smiling through the lingering sting. "Now the whole world knows where I belong." The air in the house was electric, the tether between us now a physical pull I couldn't ignore. I took his hand and led him upstairs, leaving the paperwork and the pack politics behind. In the quiet of my room, the last of our barriers fell away. The power dynamic shifted like a restless tide. One moment, I was the alpha, guiding him with a steady hand. The next, he was the wolf, his instincts taking over as he pinned me to the mattress with a feverish intensity. He kissed me with a hunger that made the world spin, his hands finding a permanent home in my hair and against my skin. "Grantham, please," I breathed, reaching for him, needing to bridge the final gap between us. "Stay with me," he whispered, his fingers tracing a path of fire across my collarbones. "Just feel this, Vianatha." He moved with a newfound confidence, his touch light and teasing one moment, then deep and possessive the next. He tested my patience, drawing out the tension until I was restless beneath him, my fingers digging into the sheets. When I finally managed to shift the balance, pulling him closer, he let out a low, vibrant growl that sent a thrill of challenge through my veins. The night became a blur of shared breath and whispered promises. We moved together in a rhythm dictated by the bond, a slow and steady climb toward a peace neither of us had ever truly known. As we finally surrendered to the pull of the moon goddess's design, the fire that had been burning within me for weeks finally broke, replaced by a wave of pure, shimmering calm. Later, as the moonlight filtered through the curtains and the house fell silent, Grantham pulled me close, his face pressed against the crook of my neck where his mark now sat. "I didn't mean to lose myself like that," he murmured into the dark, his voice filled with a quiet contentment. I rolled toward him, feeling a lethargic sense of absolute peace. I pressed a kiss to his forehead, silencing the lingering doubt in his voice. "It wasn't about losing yourself, Grantham. It was about finding us." And it was exactly what. Chapter 20. The next few days passed with a deceptive quiet. Gregor remained buried in his research, his brow permanently furrowed, though he still refused to share what he'd uncovered. Grantham had moved into my room permanently, and while we shared a bed every night, a heavy, thoughtful silence hung between us. I knew he was afraid of overstepping, and I needed the time to process the fire that had finally been lit between us. Everything was going smoothly until an aggressive, familiar rhythm of knocks hammered against my front door. I was in the kitchen, humming to myself as I prepped supper, but the sound made my blood turn to ice. I knew that knock. I opened the door, my expression going blank the moment I saw them. "What are you doing here?" My mother didn't miss a beat, batting her eyelashes with practiced innocence. "Is that any way to greet the parents you haven't spoken to in months, Vianatha?" I rolled my eyes and turned back toward the kitchen. I didn't need to invite them in. They had always acted as if every inch of my life still belonged to them. They hadn't wanted a miracle daughter. They had wanted a son to inherit the mantle. I was the disappointment who had happened to be born with alpha blood. So, what is new with our favorite child? My mother pressed, tossing her silk jacket over the back of my sofa as if she still owned the place. I'm your only child, I snapped. Which makes me your least favorite by default. My father didn't bother with the fake pleasantries. He stood by the hearth, glaring at me with a resentment that had aged like vinegar. He would have worshipped me if I'd been born a boy, but as a woman, I was simply an obstacle to his legacy. What are you making? My mother asked, peering into my pots. It smells lovely. Did you make enough for uninvited guests? No, I said flatly. Oh, come on, Vianatha. We raised you to be a compassionate leader. That's a shame, I countered, my voice dropping an octave. Because this pack needed an alpha who was tough and resilient. Since you didn't provide that, I had to build it myself. My father let out a sharp, mocking snort at the word alpha. My wolf surged, claws scraping against the inside of my mind. She wanted him to understand his place, but I kept her caged. I didn't want his blood on my kitchen floor today. V? Grantham's voice cut through the tension. He stepped into the room, and I felt the air shift. Oh, this must be the mate, my mother cooed, her eyes scanning him with a clinical coldness. Handsome, for an Omega. Grantham's face flamed, and the disrespect made my vision tunnel with rage. I reached out, grabbing his hand and pulling him firmly to my side. Why are you here? I growled. We want to discuss Alpha Jordash's proposition, my father said, finally finding his voice. Alpha Jordash made a proposition? Grantham asked, his hand tightening in mine. Oh, my father sneered, a cruel light in his eyes. So you haven't told your beloved mate about the offer to replace him? Don't speak to him. I shouted, my hand slamming onto the wooden table with enough force to make the glasses rattle. I refused Jordash, I hissed, turning to Grantham. I told him exactly where he could put his offer. I rejected every word of his twisted plot. You were foolish to do so, my mother added, her voice deceptively soft. He was offering what this pack needs, a mate who could actually handle your bloodline. A man who could lead so you wouldn't have to carry this burden alone. I am the alpha. I stood up, my presence filling the room until even my parents looked small. I fought for this pack and I won. Grantham is my mate, and he is worth 10 of the warriors. Jordash tried to trade me. A woman should never have this much authority, my father muttered, his face twisting as he spat a hateful, derogatory word at me, one meant to strip away my dignity and my title in a single breath. The room went silent. A cold, absolute calm settled over me. The last thread of daughterly loyalty snapped. They weren't my family anymore. They were a poison in my home. I am a far better leader than you ever dreamed of being, I stated, my voice a low, dangerous rumble. And Grantham is the partner this pack deserves. Since you cannot respect me, my mate, or my title, you have no place in my territory. You can't do this to us, my mother gasped, reaching for her jacket. I can and I am. I am officially banishing you from this pack, I announced, my alpha aura flaring with undeniable power. You have 24 hours to gather your things and leave. If you set foot on my land again, you will be treated as intruders. Get out of my house. Chapter 21. Vianatha, Grantham said softly, knocking on my bedroom door. Go away, I ordered. I was sitting on my bed with my head in my hands. I hadn't moved in the past 20 minutes since my parents stormed out of the house and I had raced away to my haven. Grantham sighed, fed up with my behavior, and walked into my bedroom anyway. What do you want? I demanded, lifting my head up so I could glare at him. Grantham gave me a half smile while he sat down beside me. He wound an arm around my waist, pulling me into his side. I want to thank you for standing up for me like that, he murmured. Of course I stood up for you. You're my mate, I muttered. It'll be okay, V, I know it will. They'll understand that you were upset. They'll forgive you when you tell them it was all a mistake. A mistake? I blurted, baffled. Grantham, it wasn't a mistake. I'm not embarrassed and planning to go to their house and apologize or allow them to come back into the pack. He was confused. Then why are you upset? I'm upset because I let them come into my home and talk to my mate like that. I'm upset because I fought like hell for this title. I almost killed my own father for it. Then I let them stay in the pack and they still don't respect me. I'm upset because if the pack finds out I kicked out my parents, they might become upset with me. A lot of them still aren't comfortable with a female alpha. Grantham placed a finger underneath my chin, carefully tilted my head upwards so I was looking at him. Then he leaned down and pressed his mouth softly to mine. It was possibly the most tender kiss we shared, slow and easy, just gentle affection. His hands cradled my face while mine roamed over his back, trying to get closer to him. Wow, what was that for? I asked when he pulled away. Grantham gave me a shy smile, ducking his head down slightly. I don't know if you realized it, but you basically screamed that you love me at your parents and, well, it's the first time you've said it. I paused and thought back to the incident. He was right. I had been so furious in the moment that I hadn't even realized the words came out of my mouth, but it was true. I had shouted at my parents, telling them that they were not allowed to speak badly about the man I loved. You're right, I whispered. I did say it. Did you mean it? I debated Grantham's question for a moment, wanting to answer honestly. After a moment or two, I nodded my head. Yes, I meant it, every word of it. Even though it came out angry and in the least romantic way possible. Grantham let out a little sigh and leaned his head against mine. I love you too, he mumbled, blushing. I gave him a smile and a quick kiss. Come on, let's go to bed. I'll deal with the mess I made tomorrow. After a restful night and a wonderful breakfast, Gregor showed up at my house, looking beyond frazzled and giddy. What's going on with you? I asked while I scrubbed dishes. You seem really off today. Gregor gave me a small smile. I'll tell you later, it's too complicated to say it all at once. And I need Grantham to be around when I tell you, he said. Where did he go anyway? Out for a run. I think last night was pretty rough on him. He hasn't talked about it much, but I think being treated so badly by my parents really hurt his feelings. Oh yeah, the whole pack is talking about that. Did you really kick your parents out of the pack? I did, I admitted. I could handle them being ignorant to me, but not to my mate. Besides, I've taken their crap for way too long. I just needed a reason to kick them out. You did the right thing. You handled it like an adult when most wolves would simply attack them. I considered it, but I didn't want Grantham to see me like that. We chatted for a while longer, our conversation transferring to his mate and personal life, then back to pack life, and finally paperwork, which ignited my drive to get all the work on my desk completed. Gregor helped me every now and then, popping his head in to answer questions and redirect my attention, which was helpful, and within a few hours, nearly everything was done. After all the paperwork was completed, I milled around the kitchen, looking for ingredients to cook up a wonderful meal for Grantham when he got back. He would be starving after his run. He had already been out for several hours. No sign of Grantham yet? Gregor asked. Nope. I ignored the fresh pile of papers he dumped on my desk. That's odd, he's been gone for a long time. Did he say where he was going? Just around the pack lands, but he probably extended his run a little. Are you worried? I glanced over at Gregor, wondering if I should admit to the nervousness I felt. I didn't want to. I was the alpha, sturdy and strong, not a worried wreck. But he had been gone for a long time, so I nodded my head slightly. I think it's time I asked you some questions then, Gregor stated. Chapter 22. You're absolutely crazy, I announced, staring at the old newspaper headline. You're considering it, Gregor countered. I can basically see the gears turning in your head. You think it might be a possibility. I think it's amazing you wasted so much time looking this up instead of working, but I'm not really considering this to be an option, Gregor. He just went out for a run, and he's going to come back later, that's all. It's midnight, Vianatha. He's not coming back tonight unless the search team finds him. Please consider this. I've been researching this for days. I dug into every resource I possibly could, and I think it's a match. 2 minutes ago you told me that Grantham's parents didn't even look that much like him. 75% of the population has dark brown hair, and you could have confused the eye color. This is insane. He's an Omega. I protested, but I couldn't deny the knot I felt in my stomach that was gradually tightening. I knew something was wrong. I knew something bad had happened to Grantham, but right now I could only hope my search team found him. He's adopted. He doesn't know his own ranking. Gregor argued. Listen to me, Vianatha, I think this is true. I think he could be. Enough. I yelled. My mate is in trouble and you decide to pull this. He is not a part of the royal family, Gregor. He is an Omega from Alpha Jordash's pack and I'm going to find him. I raced out of my office, leaving all of the newspaper clippings and documents behind. I darted out of my home, and the second my bare feet hit the grass, I shifted into my wolf. She would be far better at finding her mate than I would be. She was faster, stronger, and had an amazing nose. If my search team couldn't find him, then she could, and she wouldn't stop until she knew he was safe. We ran until we caught his scent along the outskirts of my pack lands. Then we followed it closely, nose to the ground, not stopping for anything. I went through creeks, sloughs, over logs, under barbed wire fences, and bridges to follow his scent, and then it just disappeared. My wolf paced around, desperate to pick up his scent again, but there was nothing. No trail led away from where we were, and when I finally lifted my head, I saw two of my trackers looking somber. We're sorry, Alpha. We tried to find him. I spanned my men out for another mile around the spot, and no one can find his scent. It's like he vanished, one of them said. My wolf whimpered at his words, the knot in her stomach so tight she nearly wanted to throw up. But when she lifted her nose and caught the smell of a nearby pack, she didn't hesitate. She bolted towards the pack, leaving my own men behind. I had to run for probably another hour before I ended up on the outskirts of the other pack lands, and I was instantly greeted by warriors. They sauntered out of the bushes, snarling at me until I growled back. I knew I should have been polite because I was trespassing, but I couldn't control myself. Luckily for me, a large brown wolf appeared, and I immediately identified him as the Alpha. Alpha Vianatha, so nice of you to drop by, Jordash said. I wanted to growl at him as well, but now was not the time, so I let out a bark, hoping he would understand. Somehow he did, and he ordered one of his men to grab me a shirt so I could shift. Once the shirt was tossed at my feet, I shifted and quickly pulled it over my skin. Grantham is gone. I need your help to find him. I know you have some of the best trackers in the country, and he came fairly close to your border, I pleaded, my voice breaking. I was almost in tears. I expected Jordash to become hostile or bitter towards me. The last time I had seen him, I had stormed out and caused a scene. But when he realized my mate was missing, his face visibly softened, and he even moved to put an arm around my shaking shoulders as an act of comfort. I'll have my men on it right away, but you need to get inside. I think you're going into shock, he said, pulling me towards his pack land. But Grantham. My men will find him, he hushed, nodding at two wolves standing behind us. Both of them took off immediately. What if he's hurt? I asked, feeling dread pool within my stomach. I need to go look for him, I said, trying to pull away from Jordash. It's all right, the other Alpha cooed. I'm not letting you go after him. You're tired, you're cold, and your body is so stressed out it's shaking. I don't care how much you argue. I'm going to make you drink some tea and have a nap before anything else is decided. Am I clear? I wanted to fight him, to tell him the man I loved was somewhere out there in the wilderness, but I couldn't do it. He was right. My whole body was trembling, I was exhausted, and I was so worried I felt sick. So I let him walk me into his village and direct me to a quaint house. I would suggest that you stay in my home, but my maid is gone and I feel like you need some company. Sterlia will take good care of you, I promise. All right, I sighed, following him to the door. Jordash knocked on the front door of the house, and a few seconds later, a man opened the door, looking startled. Alpha Jordash, what are you doing here? He asked. I need a favor from you. Alpha Vianatha lost her mate. He's gone off in the woods somewhere. Can you keep an eye on her while the other men search for him? I'm worried she's gone into shock. Of course, Alpha, he replied, then cast his brown eyes down to me. Please, Alpha, come in. I did as I was told, mostly on autopilot now. The two men continued to talk for some time. Alpha Jordash said something about joining the search effort, but I ignored him. My brain was running in circles. I was thinking of all the places he could have gone, but with a disappearing scent trail, I was coming up blank. I tried to think of how the trail just vanished, but nothing came to mind. Then I began wondering if he had simply left me, and my heart clenched painfully. Would you like to sit down? Sterlio asked. Jordash was gone, the front door closed, and I was left alone with a very concerned man. That would be lovely, I replied with a queasy smile. Sterlio was very kind. He took me to the living room, where he directed me to a very soft leather couch and carefully placed a thin blanket over me. Afterwards, he brewed me some tea and turned on the television. He didn't talk much. He would occasionally look at me to make sure I wasn't having a breakdown, but his presence was comforting. We stayed side by side and silent for hours before my body started to get sore, and I had to stand up. I should go back to my pack, I announced. It's a long run back to your pack, Alpha Vianatha. It's late and you're already exhausted, Sterlio argued. Stay the night, it's no bother, really, and tomorrow you won't have to run all the way back. I yawned, and I could tell he was right. My body was aching, and the trek tomorrow would be harder than today. Okay, I agreed. Sterlio made sure that I was fed. He made me a microwave meal, then he attempted to convert the leather couch into a bed by bringing me a heap of blankets and a small pillow. This is all I have, so I hope this is all right, he said as I adjusted the blankets. This is more than I could have asked for. Good night, Sterlio. And just like that, I drifted off to sleep in another man's house while my mate was somewhere else in the world, by himself. Chapter 23. When I woke up, it was much later than I expected. I instantly tried to toss the blankets off my body so I could go find my mate, but a gentle hand grabbed my arm. Are you okay? Sterlio asked, his brow furrowed. I need to go find Grantham, I said, trying to tug myself out of his grip. Vianatha, the search team looking for him is miles from here. I talked to my Alpha this morning. He said they're in the next state already. You can't go after them. He argued, but when he saw the horror on my face, he softened. I'm sorry, I know you want to help. Help. I sputtered. I should be leading the team. That's my mate out there. What the hell was I thinking, spending the night here? He needs me, and I'm here having tea with someone from his old pack. Vianatha, stop it. Sterlio yelled, catching me off guard. I mean no disrespect. I think you're a great Alpha, and you must have been a great mate to him. But you can't keep doing this to yourself. The search team will do all they can, and when they find him, they will bring him back home to you. Right now, you just need to stay calm and wait. I stared up at Sterlio, meeting his brown eyes with a challenging stare of my own, but he didn't look angry. He just looked concerned. Please, Alpha Vianatha, just stay here. I'll take care of you until your mate comes back, I promise. I sighed, relaxing into his hold slightly. It's just hard. He's my mate. I'm supposed to take care of him no matter what. I love him, and I'm letting other people do all of the work, I explained. What kind of Alpha am I if I let other people deal with my pack members, especially my mate? You're a good Alpha. Everyone in this state knows that, Sterlio said. I gave him a questioning look. I'm a woman. A lot of wolves don't respect me. How could they think I'm a good Alpha? Sterlio chuckled slightly. I don't think anyone liked you when you first came into power, he murmured, taking my elbow and guiding me into the kitchen. I remember it quite well, actually. Even my pack members were upset that you were ready to take the title. But no one likes change. It's nature. And you represented a lot of change for them. I rolled my eyes. People are stubborn and stuck in their ways. Sterlio smiled. So are you. You didn't back down when most wolves would have. If that's not stubborn, I don't know what is. But it doesn't matter now. Your pack loves you. I think you have a lot more loyalty from your members than any other pack I've ever seen. Your pack is in much better hands than it was when your father was in power. I was incredibly touched by his words, so much so that I almost started tearing up. Luckily, he was turned away, mixing some ingredients in a bowl. What are you making? I asked, trying to lighten the mood. Pancakes. I hope that's all right with you. Sterlio and I enjoyed a quiet breakfast together where we talked about trivial things. He was very sweet and handsome with his brown eyes and blonde hair. He was no Grantham, I knew that much, but I wished he were part of my pack. He was simply a pleasure to have around. Eventually, he told me he needed to leave for training, but he invited me to use his home as I pleased in his absence. At first, I felt a little odd. I didn't like the feeling of snooping while I was simply watching television. It felt invasive because he wasn't there with me. But my bladder went out eventually, and I had to move through his house, looking for the bathroom. The only one I could find was an ensuite in his bedroom. After I had used the washroom, I ended up taking my time in his room. Someone's living space could say a lot about them. What I found out about Sterlio horrified me. I saw a picture of him holding a woman, which wasn't startling. I had already assumed he was single, but I was content to think that he had a mate. In fact, it made me happy to think that he had found someone who made him happy. But then I saw other things, like a funeral booklet and cards indicating he had suffered a loss recently. Part of me told me to just leave and ignore everything I had seen, but I couldn't stop myself from picking up the funeral booklet. My heart dropped. The woman in all of the pictures, his mate, was the one who had passed away. This was the warrior that Jordash was desperate to set me up with. I had slept in his house. I had breakfast at his table. I had talked to him like we were friends. Furious and panicked, I raced out of Sterlio's house, hardly giving myself time to put on shoes. He wasn't the kind, gentle man I thought he was. He was only acting like it to get me to reject my own mate. How could he do such a thing when he knew my mate was out in the woods alone? What kind of man was he? Disgusted, I ran towards the only building in the pack territory where I felt I could get answers. Grantham's parents' house. I could deny it all I wanted, but Gregor's words had been ebbing at me. Grantham never talked about his past. I didn't know a thing about him. I didn't want to sit around waiting for him like an idiot. I wanted to use my time to get some answers. When I got to his childhood home, I didn't hesitate. I just pounded on the door. Alpha Vianatha, his father said, dropping his eyes. Can I ask you a few questions? I blurted, already forcing my way into their home. Chapter 24. Our house is such a mess, I'm so sorry, Grantham's mother whispered, scrubbing at some dishes in the sink. I'm not concerned about that, I said stiffly. I would have been nicer on any other day, but today was simply too much for me. I needed answers now. Anything, Alpha, his father replied, his eyes wide. Part of me wanted to comfort them, but my wolf was far more concerned with finding her beloved mate. After figuring out just who Alpha Jordash was, she was in a frenzy, and I knew she would stop at nothing to find out the truth. Are you Grantham's parents? I demanded. Yes, his mother murmured. You gave birth to him? I questioned, raising my eyebrows. She suddenly looked embarrassed, dropping her eyes to the floor. No, Alpha, we adopted him. I sighed, rubbing my face with an open palm. There was such a slim chance that my mate was the lost part of the royal family, but Grantham being adopted opened up the door for more possibilities. You adopted him? Like from an agency? I thought only humans did that, I said, wandering towards the kitchen table. Grantham's mother took the initiative to go and fill the kettle with water for tea, and I didn't complain. I figured this was going to be a long talk, filled with surprises. It wasn't through an agency, and definitely not a human agency. We could not risk having a human boy in a pack of werewolves, Grantham's dad protested. I nodded. So how were you able to adopt him if it wasn't through an agency then? Alpha Jordash found him in the middle of the night, and we were the only couple that was unable to have kids. At least, that's what we were told, Grantham's dad explained. He just found a child in the middle of the night and dropped it off at your house? I demanded. That's very peculiar. Well, that's what he told us, Grantham's father said defensively. What were we supposed to believe? I held up my hands in surrender, not wanting to start an altercation. I just want to know what happened, I said, softening my voice. It's a family matter. Grantham's father barked. You have no right to barge into my home like this and demand answers. Octavius. Grantham's mother shrieked in horror. Her hands trembled as she set the teapot and cups on the kitchen table. That is no way to talk to an alpha, she chided, trying to calm her mate down while still looking polite. He means no disrespect, Alpha. I understand. This is a very stressful time for both of you. I didn't expect you to be cheery since your son is missing anyway. Grantham's missing? His mother gasped, placing a hand over her heart. Oh no, I whispered. I thought your pack members would have told you by now. I'm so sorry. After my announcement, it took several minutes to calm Grantham's parents. His mother immediately started to cry, and her mate became furious, blaming me for his son's disappearance. I tried not to be offended. If I had been born an Omega ruled over by a cruel Alpha, and my son suddenly went missing after being mated to another Alpha, I might assume the worst, too. But I told him it wasn't me, and after a few minutes of convincing, he seemed to believe me. Grantham's mother was still incredibly distressed, but I had questions I still needed answers to. So can you tell me everything you know about Grantham's childhood? I asked. Grantham's mom just shrugged her shaking shoulders. We know very little about his life before us. When he came to us, he was only 2 or 3. He couldn't remember anything before us. Did Jordash tell you anything? Surely he had to know something about the boy he found. Well, he said that Grantham's pack was attacked and that he was only able to save Grantham. The whole pack thought it was a very noble thing for our Alpha to do, and we were honored that he selected us to be the parents of this boy. So you were given Grantham about 18 years ago? Yes. I pondered this for a while as I sipped my tea, then nodded. Well, can you tell me anything about his early years with you? Grantham's father finally spoke up. He wasn't born to be an Omega. He was born of a higher ranking. He didn't listen to anyone very well, but he was taught early enough that he had to listen or he would be punished. I tried not to shudder at the thought of my mate being young and sweet and being punished simply because he was forced to lower his ranking. Was Alpha Jordash always this brutal with everyone? No, Grantham's father murmured. He wasn't so awful before. The pack was run peacefully and easily. His father was a gentle leader, and he had been as well until he found Grantham. Everyone in the pack assumed that seeing a full pack slaughtered before his eyes damaged him emotionally. He hasn't been the same since that night. I gave out a little sigh and rubbed my hands over my face. I'm sorry he had to be your Alpha, honestly. My pack is run much differently than your own, and it's a shame you had to endure his rule. Even if he was traumatized, he had no right to take it out on you. Grantham's mother gave me a timid smile. I'm glad that some Omegas are treated differently, she whispered. No one deserves to be treated as less than, and if I knew the agony that Grantham would be subjected to, I would have never taken him in. I would have wanted him to have a higher-ranking family. Chapter 25. Gregor milled around the kitchen table, sifting through old newspapers and occasionally sitting down to search for information. You can stop this madness anytime, I said as I sipped my coffee. I didn't usually drink coffee, but the nights hadn't been treating me all that well anymore. I would wake up yearning for Grantham to be beside me, and I wouldn't be able to fall asleep until my body was so exhausted it couldn't stay awake any longer. Caffeine had been my savior. At the very least, it kept me from lashing out at my pack members. He's not even my mate, and yet I'm doing all the work. You should be grateful to have such a loyal beta, Gregor chided. This isn't madness, by the way. I'm going off of facts, not hunches. Whatever you say, I muttered, taking another sip. I'm just surprised that Jordash hasn't raced out here to drag me back to his warrior's house, so he could force us to have pups for his pack, I hissed. You're still upset about that? Gregor asked. Of course I'm upset. How could he do such a thing to another Alpha? I growled. It shows me nothing but disrespect. I lost my mate, and instead of letting me go to my mate's parents' home, he shoved me in a house with a man who recently lost his mate in hopes that we would breed together. It's disgusting that he would take advantage of me while I was vulnerable. Gregor offered me a reassuring squeeze of the shoulder as he moved to grab yet another newspaper. Sterlio was even so sweet to me. I know he was supposed to be, but it seemed so genuine, like it was just who he was. Frankly, that's the only reason I stayed at his house. He just made me feel welcome when I needed someone the most, you know. Maybe he wasn't faking it, Bianatha, Gregor suggested. He had abandoned his post at the newspapers and begun to fry eggs for me. I told myself that I had the best beta in the world. What do you mean? Maybe he's just nice, and maybe he was just as vulnerable as you were. Losing a mate is hard on anyone. Then he had this woman who just lost her mate in his house. It doesn't mean he's a horrible person, Gregor whispered. I sighed. I suppose not, but I can still be mad at Jordash. Gregor gave me a little lopsided smile. You can be as mad as you would like about him. He had no right to do any of those things. I stayed with Gregor for a few more minutes and ate the breakfast he cooked for me. He was looking out for me more than I was looking out for myself. It felt good to know I had someone in my corner. After I finished the food, he encouraged me to drink a cup of orange juice, but he didn't protest when I told him I was going for a run. I guess he knew he couldn't stop me anyway. My run was light and easy. I wanted to race around like a rabid wolf so that I would be so exhausted I couldn't stand, but I had to remind myself I had a pack to run. Mate or not, people needed to know their leader was stable, so I loped along the outskirts of my pack lands and tried to keep my wolf in check. I expected her to try to race away, but she was just trying to get back to the house. Eventually, I gave up on trying to fight her and allowed her to run back home. I assumed she was craving Gregor's comfort. He wasn't Grantham, but he had been with me through many obstacles, and he knew how to keep me calm. I shifted outside, went indoors, and pulled a baggy hoodie out of the closet. Vianatha, I know you don't want to listen to me, but please, I honestly think I have something. Gregor, I groaned. Vianatha, please, just listen for a few minutes, and if you don't believe me after that, I'll drop it. I gave a little grunt in disapproval, but eventually nodded my head. You have 5 minutes, Gregor. Okay, come look at these, Gregor ordered, pointing to some newspapers. They were roughly 20 years old, and the headline announced that the young prince had been stolen from the castle. I had only been alive for a few months when this had happened, so it had very little effect on me, and I never paid much attention to the case, but I could understand how it caused fear throughout the community at the time. I've seen these, I said. I know that, but when I searched for headlines about massive attacks on packs during this time period, there was nothing. The only attacks close to the right time are immensely spread out. There was one 3 years before the prince went missing and another small attack almost 4 years after he was gone, so Jordash's story doesn't line up. We already know he lied, I muttered. This is nothing new. It's not, Gregor agreed, but his parents admitted that he was adopted, which also helps. Grantham had to come from somewhere, but there's no record of where. They didn't even get a birth certificate for him, so that means it was done illegally. Gregor darted over to the laptop sitting on the table, pulling me with him. Now, since he didn't come from a rogue attack, and we know that Jordash lied about it, that does broaden the possibilities. I tried not to roll my eyes as he pulled up various tabs before finally pointing to one. Look at this, Vianatha. The royals have a list of guests that come through the castle and Jordash signed in just 2 days before the prince went missing. Even more odd, he never checks out. Gregor, I moaned. You can't be serious about all this. Grantham isn't the prince. He certainly wasn't an Omega, Gregor retorted. Grantham's parents told you that other wolves had a hard time controlling him. Fine, I'll humor you. Why would Jordash take the prince? Gregor gave me a sly smile. Why would Jordash want you to mate one of his warriors? Because he's a horrible person. Because he's power-hungry, Gregor corrected. He wanted to absorb the pack, but he saw you almost kill your own father. He knew he didn't have a chance in a fight against you. That has nothing to do with Grantham. But it does. Grantham was shoved into an Omega's house when everyone knew he should have been placed higher. If Jordash was actually doing what was best for his pack, he would have had Grantham as a warrior, but that would have only strengthened Grantham, and he needed to keep him suppressed instead. He could do that by having the whole pack treat him poorly. So Grantham was not an issue for several years. He would just wither away as Jordash wanted. But then you came along and you not only accepted him, you gave him the opportunity to have power. Now, if Jordash wanted to suppress him before, he wouldn't be happy about this. He's always wanted your pack, so he formulated a plan to mate you with Sterlio. That would get rid of both you and Grantham in one clean swipe. This doesn't make sense, I whined, holding my head. I felt like my brain was in overdrive. Jordache took Grantham. But why steal the prince? I demanded. Power. There's no new heir to the throne, and Jordache would have the largest pack if he managed to absorb yours. With no one to take over the lineage, the power would be given to him. Why not just kill Grantham then? Killing royals is incredibly hard, and I think harming a child would be nearly impossible for anyone who isn't a complete monster, Gregor explained. What do you mean killing a royal is hard? It's almost impossible to kill a royal. They're structured with much more supernatural power and an incredibly fast healing process. I'm not even certain if it's possible for a wolf to kill a royal, Gregor rambled. But Grantham took forever to heal, I argued. When he first came here, he was almost dead, and it took him months to get better. Gregor nodded vigorously. He had been malnourished for years, beaten within an inch of his life. Of course it took him a long time to heal. His body couldn't handle healing quickly because it didn't have the nutrients needed, but he had been so malnourished for so long he couldn't handle being fed either. I spoke to Carmilla, and she admitted she had never seen a wolf so close to death, and she was astonished he made it. They probably kept him as close to death as they could to keep him under control. None of this matters right now. Grantham's gone, I protested, not wanting to believe it. It matters, Vianatha. I am almost positive that Jordache has him somewhere. But why? Because his first two plans failed, and he got desperate. Grantham went for a run, and Jordache was probably just waiting to snatch him up. It wouldn't be hard if all Grantham has known is being overpowered by Jordache. He would give in right away. And then you just fell into the plan, Vianatha. You went running onto his packlands, desperate for your mate, and Jordache led you to Sturlio. Oh no, I panted, clutching the edge of the table. Gregor, what do we do now? We go to the royals and pray that they listen to us. Chapter 26. I can't believe we're doing this, I sighed as Gregor and I trudged up the steep incline towards the grand castle. I don't think we have much of a choice, Gregor muttered back. If we tried to approach the castle in wolf form, we would be eaten alive by the family's many guards. The royal family lived in their ancestors' home, Neuschwanstein Castle in Germany. After an 11-hour last-minute flight, I wasn't feeling particularly inclined to scale the hill required to reach the palace. I felt even less inclined to break in and demand that the king and queen listen to us. But Gregor was right. We didn't have a choice. We either barged in or we booked a meeting for the next opening, for months from now. I would be beyond lucky if Grantham were still alive in 4 months, and the thought made my stomach twist. The castle was located far from other homes, and the road winding up the mountain was not accessible by vehicle, only by foot or horse. The trip up would have been breathtaking if I hadn't been so tired. The road was surrounded by forest-housing birds and small critters, and at this early hour, everything was still. At this point, I was simply grateful the castle had been placed on the side of the mountain rather than the top. My tension didn't heighten until we reached the gate, finally on flat ground, but confronted by sturdy guards who weren't pleased to see guests so early. Please, I wheezed, my throat dry and my knees trembling from exhaustion. Please, we need to speak to the king and queen. It's an emergency. I wanted to stand tall, like the alpha I was, but I couldn't. My body hadn't slept properly for days. At this point, I feared I would pass out. You can do no such thing, one of the guards snapped, his golden eyes furious. The king and queen do not appreciate surprises in the middle of the night. Please, I'm begging, I whispered. My mate is in trouble. He needs help, and I can't do it alone. The royals do not partake in house calls, the guard hissed. I could see his fangs extending as he became more defensive. Now go back to where you came from. I might have been exhausted beyond belief, and I might have wanted to plead on my knees, but I was still an alpha, and my wolf did not tolerate being spoken to that way. Stand down, I snarled. I'm an alpha, and you will show me no disrespect. My knees still shook, but my voice was loud and clear. Vianatha, Gregor warned timidly. Don't do this. The guard looked amused, but I could tell he wanted a fight. He wanted to teach me a lesson, and my wolf wanted to do the same to him. This moment felt very similar to the moment when Grantham challenged me in my own home. I said stand down. I shrieked, giving him one last warning. To my surprise and the guard's horror, he actually took an involuntary step back, bowing his head slightly. As he did so, his eyes widened, and his mouth dropped open in shock. His body contorted as he tried to remain standing, but his wolf obeyed my command and dropped to one knee as a sign of submission. I just blinked and gawked. I had never been able to force someone to do as I wanted with only my words, but judging by the guard's pained expression, he wasn't following orders out of obedience. He was showing me respect because his wolf had to. The guard had no conscious choice in the matter. I had heard of the alpha tone before, but I never believed it was true. No alpha I had ever known held such power, and I had never been able to use it either until now. What did you do? Gregor asked, sounding just as dumbfounded as I was. I don't know exactly, I replied honestly, a little shaken. But then I thought of Grantham, all alone somewhere, waiting for my help, and my brain began to function properly again. It doesn't matter. We need to find the king and queen and tell them what's going on. Gregor and I raced through the grand castle in search of the owners. Occasionally, I would find myself admiring the place. It truly was gorgeous. But then I would become lost, run into a guard, or become frustrated with the sheer size of the building. I didn't have time for frills when I was dealing with an emergency. Fianatha, Gregor shouted. When I glanced over, I saw two bulging guards holding swords moving towards him in a threatening manner. My heart rate sped up. I might have lost my mate, but I was not going to lose my beta too. I raced over to Gregor as quickly as I could, my legs still weak. I shouted for the guards to back off, my voice coming out weakly at first. They simply smirked at my attempt to subdue them, but as they neared Gregor, I became more frightened for his safety. When I yelled again, they all froze, stunned, and then they also knelt against their will. I could feel the power radiating out of me like electricity, and I was baffled by the sensation. I didn't have time to dwell on it because a door opened and slammed shut. What is going on out here? The masculine voice rang with so much authority, I knew it belonged to the king. Chapter 27. I whirled around to face the king, startled and horrified. This was not how I wanted my first introduction with the royal family to go, and I doubted he would help me after he just heard me screeching at his very own guards. But when my eyes settled on him, I felt an amazing sense of relaxation waft over me. It wasn't because he had gentle features or looked concerned, because he looked beyond furious. It was because he made Gregor's theory feel correct. He looked just like Grantham. Oh my God, I breathed, placing a hand over my pounding heart. What have you done to my guards? He demanded. Who are you? We need your help, please. Gregor yelled, sounding just as desperate as I felt. Guards, the king yelled, his vibrant green eyes searching for backup. He visibly relaxed when a dozen more men came trampling out of the castle, armed with weapons, but someone else joined the march as well. A Vongard, a woman called. The queen raced down a set of stone stairs, bundled up in a robe. She might have just woken up, but she looked far more regal than I could ever hope to, even while stricken with panic. Within a matter of seconds, she was beside her husband, and guards were surrounding both of them. We aren't here to hurt anyone, I said, raising my hands in surrender. Part of me knew I couldn't win. Even if I were somehow able to defeat these guards, I was certain that the king would call for more. We need help, and we didn't have time to waste. Please listen. That's enough out of you, the king shouted. He wrapped a protective arm around his queen and narrowed his eyes. Guards, take them to the dungeons. The guards loomed towards Gregor and me at once, moving with a slow, steady grace that terrified me. I was weak and exhausted. I wasn't ready for more fighting, but I wasn't about to be thrown in the dungeons willingly either. I didn't come all this way to give up because my eyes were heavy. I sucked in one more breath, raised my hands, and shouted, I command you to stand down immediately. The guards fought their bodies. They tried to pursue us. They tried to stand on their own 2 feet. They simply couldn't do it. They dropped onto one knee, bowed their heads, and remained immobile. What are you doing? The king yelled, distress clear in his voice. She's too strong, one of the guards wheezed, still trying to get to his feet. My God, she must have royal blood in her, the queen whispered. I opened my mouth to ask her what she meant, but my body couldn't handle the strain anymore. Exhaustion finally defeated me, and my eyes drooped closed as I collapsed. I woke up slowly, every muscle in my body aching. My mind was racing too quickly to keep me asleep. I knew my mind would always be stronger than my body. "She's waking up," a man whispered. It took me a moment to place the voice as the king's. When I did, the memories came flooding back, and I sat up instantly. I gave out a moan as dizziness hit me. I swayed a little but remained upright. My eyes darted around the room, trying to identify where I was. The first thing I noticed was that guards were everywhere, and my beta was nowhere to be found, which made my chest tighten. Then I realized I was in a grand room, one much larger than my own back home, filled with extravagant details. "Where am I?" I whispered, placing a hand on my forehead to ease the vertigo. "You may ask questions later. Who are you?" The king's voice boomed through the room, but I couldn't see him behind the guards. "Where is my beta?" I pressed, ignoring him. "In the dungeon where he belongs," the king replied curtly. I gasped. "Why on earth did you put him in the dungeon?" "Enough." "Who are you?" The king snarled, finally stepping toward me. I knew he was angry and frightened, but every time I saw his features, I couldn't help but soften. He looked just like Grantham. "How come I'm not in the dungeon with him?" The king rolled his eyes. "There's hardly a point in locking you up if you can simply command someone to open the cell for you." I scrubbed my hands over my face. "I want Gregor released immediately." The king ignored me again. "Tell me who you are." I decided to give in, seeing as arguing would only take up more time. "I am Alpha Vianatha," I announced. "Alpha Vianatha," the queen murmured, pushing guards away so she could come closer. "Yes," I replied. "Sophiana, please, don't get too close." "We don't know what she wants," the king warned. "She's got royal blood in her. She'll do what she pleases whether I'm right beside her or 20 feet away," Avangard, the queen argued. "We don't know she's royal," the king countered. "Oh, for the love of God, Avangard, she can overpower our guards. Not even the strongest alpha could do that. She must have royal blood." The king looked like he wanted to argue with his mate, but then he clamped his mouth shut and turned back to me. "So you're the female alpha that everyone is so curious about." He raked his eyes over me. I expected more. "That's enough, Avangard," the queen scolded. "Tell me, how do you have royal blood in your system?" "From what I understand, your parents are high-ranking leaders, but hardly worthy of royal blood." I cringed at the mention of my parents, but answered anyway. "I don't know if I have royal blood. I've never been able to command anyone like that before." "I wasn't aware I could," I confessed. The queen seemed shocked, but covered it quickly. "Well, if you didn't know you were royal, then why on earth did you come to Germany? You are American, if I remember correctly." "I came because there have been several issues within my pack, and I think I may have information you need to know," I whispered. The queen hesitated and looked at her mate, but dismissed him when he shook his head in warning. "What kind of information is that?" I swallowed hard. "I think I may know who your son is." Chapter 28. "Stop. Not another word," the king thundered, his knuckles white as he gripped the arms of his throne. "I will not have you stand in my halls and spin fantasies out of our tragedy." "Please, your majesty," I said, my voice steady despite the exhaustion clawing at my chest. "I am not here for games. I am here because I believe the truth has been hidden for 18 years. "Silence." Avangard's voice cracked like a whip. "You come here with a stolen command, trespassing in my home, and now you dangle hope like a lure? I should have you exiled this instant for such cruelty." "Avangard, wait," the queen whispered, her hand trembling as she reached for his arm. "Look at her eyes. She isn't mocking us. She's desperate. Because she's a fugitive, Sophiana." "This is a fabrication to save her own skin," the king retorted, though his gaze flickered with a hint of hesitation. He turned back to me, his green eyes burning with a cold, protective fire. "Fine. Speak. But know this. If this is a hoax, if you are using the memory of our son to bargain for your life, you will never see the sun set on German soil again. Am I clear?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. The stakes weren't just my life anymore. They were Grantham's. "I understand." I took a breath, letting the warmth of the tea the queen had ordered settle my nerves. I met my mate, Grantham, a few months ago. In my territory, he was presented as an Omega from Alpha Jordash's pack. It defied every law of our lineage for an Alpha of my standing to be paired with an Omega, but the bond was undeniable. When I brought him home, I saw what Jordash had truly done to him. I felt a tear slip, but I didn't brush it away. He was a shadow. Malnourished, terrified, and so physically broken it took months of care before he could even stand unaided. He had been suppressed, Your Majesty. Kept weak on purpose. This is a tragedy of a common wolf, the king muttered, though he had stopped pacing. What does it have to do with the prince? Everything, I countered. As Grantham healed, his true nature emerged. He didn't just recover, he surpassed every warrior in my pack. He moved with a grace that no Omega could possess. And then, 2 weeks ago, he vanished during a run. No struggle, no scent trail, as if he were erased. The queen leaned forward, her face pale. Go on, dear. My beta, Gregor, began digging into the records. We went to the couple who raised Grantham. They admitted, under my authority, that they had adopted him. There is no birth certificate. There is no record of his origin. They claimed Alpha Jordash found him after a pack massacre 18 years ago, right as Jordash was returning from a visit to this very castle. The king's expression shifted from anger to a chilling, sharp focus. He gestured to a guard near the door. Bring me the ledger of the Great Hall from 18 years ago. No. Jordash lied about the massacre, I continued, my voice gaining strength. There were no pack attacks during that window. He took a child with royal blood, and hid him in plain sight by forcing him into the lowest rank of society. He kept Grantham broken so that the world would never see the prince beneath the scars. But why? The queen whispered, her voice breaking. Jordash was a friend of the crown. Power, I said simply. Jordash approached me. He tried to force me to reject Grantham and mate with one of his elite warriors instead. He wanted our packs to merge. If my territory and his became one, he would command a force larger than the royal guard. With no heir to the throne, he wasn't just building a pack, he was building an empire to replace yours. A heavy silence fell over the room. The only sound was the crackle of the fireplace and the king's ragged breathing. He looked at the queen, and for the first time, I saw the mask of the sovereign fall, revealing a father's agonizing hope. Sophiana, the king gasped, his voice barely a whisper. He is our son. Chapter 29. I wasn't sure how long I had been in the cell anymore. Days and weeks had blurred into a single, unending shadow. Without the touch of sunlight or a glimpse of the sky, I had no compass for time. I was so far underground that the world above, the rain, the wind, the rustle of leaves, felt like a dream I'd once had. All I knew was the persistent ache of cold, the hollow pull of hunger, and a weariness that settled deep in my bones. My strength was fading. The long stretch without a real meal had taken a visible toll, leaving me far thinner and weaker than I'd ever been. I looked at my trembling hands and wondered if my body would even remember how to process food if I were finally offered some. I feared the sustenance I craved so badly would be rejected by a system that had grown used to emptiness. I rolled onto my stomach, my back aching against the unforgiving concrete floor. At least the sharp discomfort provided a distraction. It kept my mind from drifting toward the darker corners of despair, from the fear that I might never see my mate again, or the crushing weight of not being able to say a final goodbye to my parents. I couldn't help but wonder why Alpha Jordash hadn't just ended it. He had gone to such lengths to drag me down here, into a room with no windows and a solid steel door. He even sent guards to check on me daily, as if I had any strength left to challenge these walls. If his goal was simply to remove me, he could have done it the day he found me on my run. This felt like something else, something more calculated. I rolled onto my back when the pressure on my ribs became too much, letting out a soft sigh as Vianatha filled my thoughts. She wasn't the softest soul I had ever met, nor was she the most conventional, but she still made my heart flutter with a single memory. I missed her with an intensity that bordered on physical pain. But lately, that ache felt different. It wasn't just longing, it was a heavy, sinking intuition. She was an alpha. I'd known it the second our eyes met. She moved with a hostile grace and a terrifying precision that commanded the room. She was a force of nature, and I knew any man would be drawn to that light. But like every true leader, her heart belonged to her pack first. Their survival was her primary devotion. I tried to understand that loyalty, I truly did. She fought for her people with more ferocity than any wolf I'd ever known. She had even stood against her own father for their sake. And yet, she had told me she loved me. When Alpha Jordash found me and claimed that Vianatha was moving on with someone from his pack, I felt like the world had fractured. I was devastated, spiraling through 1,000 whys, until the pieces started to fit together in a way that broke me. She wanted her pack to thrive, to be strong. Perhaps she believed that an Omega mate would only hold them back. Jordash claimed he locked me away to prevent a confrontation with the man he said Vianatha had chosen. In those early days, I was blinded by a sense of betrayal. I had wanted to break out, to demand answers, to face the person who was taking my place. But every failed attempt at the door reminded me of the truth of my situation. I didn't want to be the reason for her unhappiness. If she truly believed she needed someone else to ensure her pack's future, who was I to stand in the way? I wanted to wake up beside her every morning and grow old in her shadow. There was nothing I wanted more. But if her happiness required me to step aside, I made the agonizing choice to let her go, even if it meant disappearing into this silence forever. A few stray tears escaped, and I wiped them away with the back of my hand just as a sudden roar of shouting erupted outside. My ears strained, trying to catch the words, but the chaos vanished as quickly as it had begun, leaving an eerie quiet in its wake. Then, the heavy thud of the main door echoed through the hall. I leapt to my feet, my heart hammering against my ribs. I was desperate for anything: food, a voice, even a hostile face. Anything was better than the suffocating stillness. Peering through the narrow slit in the steel door, I saw two strangers being led by a warrior named Sterlio. Sterlio looked pale, his hands shaking slightly as he approached my cell. "What's happening?" I asked, my voice coming out in a raspy, hoarse whisper. Sterlio didn't meet my eyes. He simply jammed the key into the lock and swung the door wide. Chapter 30. I watched as Jordash's men faltered under the weight of my command. Having never experienced such an overwhelming aura of authority, they were trapped in place, unable to fight the instinct to obey. Seeing them forced to stop gave me a grim sense of satisfaction, a small fraction of the justice Grantham deserved. I wished I had a heart cold enough to make them feel every ounce of the suffering they had caused, but I had to remember they were merely following the orders of a corrupt leader. "Well, it looks like she figured out where her mate went," Jordash leered, sauntering out of his home. He didn't spare his men a second glance as he approached, stalking toward me with a predatory confidence. "Don't you dare come any closer," I commanded, my voice ringing out with more power than I knew I possessed. "I will not let you touch him again." Jordash froze. His eyes widened as his own body refused to move another inch. "What is this?" he hissed, struggling against the invisible weight of my will. "How could you be so heartless?" I yelled, my voice trembling with a mix of fury and grief. "You claim to lead, yet you betray the very bonds that make us strong. You have no idea the damage you've caused." I was shaking, terrified of what I might find in that cell. If I were too late. If Grantham hadn't been strong enough to endure this, I would hold Jordash and every one of his followers accountable. "Bonds are for the weak," Jordash scoffed. "What is a mate compared to absolute rule? I would sacrifice anyone to ensure I have the respect of every pack in this territory." "You're sick," I snarled. "Respect isn't built on cruelty. A mate is a blessing, the one person you can trust with your life. Without that foundation, you aren't a leader. You're just a tyrant." "You are always too emotional to run a pack alone," Jordash mocked, trying to mask his fear with arrogance. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "You're very brave for a man who can't even take a step toward me." I was ready to end his reign right then. He had pushed me too far, still clinging to his prejudice even in defeat. I wanted to make an example of him, but a soft sound broke through my rage. "Vianatha." Grantham's voice was barely a breath, but it made my heart stop. I spun around, and the air left my lungs. He looked like a shadow of himself, far worse than when I'd first met him. He was gaunt and pale, his strength clearly depleted by his time in the dark. He had been pushed to the very edge of human endurance. I wanted to fly to his side, but the wolf inside me was screaming for retribution. She hated the man who had brought Grantham to this point. "Secure the perimeter," I shouted to my warriors as the shift took over. In seconds, I was on 4 paws, stalking toward Jordash. He looked like a cornered animal now, and the sight of his fear fueled my wolf's need for justice. He needed to know he had crossed the wrong alpha. "Vianatha," Grantham rasped. His voice was barely a whisper, but it caught my attention. "Vianatha, please, listen to me." I paused, looking back at him. He had fallen to his knees, but he wouldn't break eye contact. "Don't do this," he pleaded. I let out a low growl. I wanted Jordash to pay for every second Grantham spent in that cell. "Vianatha, if you do this, you're choosing his path, not yours," Grantham said, his voice straining. "I know you're angry, but this isn't who you are. Don't let his cruelty change you." I turned my head away, my wolf still pacing, but Grantham wouldn't give up. "Vianatha, please. Do it for me." My resolve fractured. My heart melted, even though the fire of my anger still burned. Jordash had violated every law of our community, but perhaps I didn't have to be the one to deliver the final blow. "Alpha Jordash," a sharp voice rang out. Sophiana, the queen, stepped forward, and Jordash's face went pale with genuine horror. "You have violated our laws on a scale that cannot be ignored. You will be held accountable, and anyone who aided you will face the same fate. I can assure you, you will answer for every life you have disrupted." I felt the tension leave my body, knowing justice would be served through the proper channels. But when I looked back at Grantham, my relief turned to terror. He had collapsed on his side, clutching his stomach in agony. Chapter 31. I didn't care that I had royals in my house. I didn't care that those royals were my mate's parents or that they were passing judgment on my decorating. I didn't care that the queen and king were having an intense conversation about what to do with their prisoners. I didn't care that I was supposed to act brave. I didn't care that I had barely moved in 3 days. I was sitting on Grantham's bed with tears streaming down my cheeks as I assessed his unconscious form. He was painfully skinny, even worse than he was when I had first found him, and seeing him so still stressed me out. Carmilla had admitted it was a miracle he was even alive, but she also told me that if he had made it this far, he should be able to recover. I believed her. She was an amazing doctor. But it still scared me. My head kept spinning with questions. What if we hadn't found him in time? The possibilities freaked me out. My mate could have starved while I was in another man's house. I could have ignored Gregor's prodding, and Grantham could have withered away. Sterlio could have captivated me, and I could have destroyed everything I had. Vianatha. Gregor's soft voice and quiet knock pulled me out of my thoughts. I didn't even think. I launched myself out of my chair and into his arms. "Hey," he chuckled, running a soothing hand over my back. "Thank you for everything," I whispered. "I don't know what would have happened to him if you hadn't told me about the royals." "It's okay, Vianatha. You don't have to cry," Gregor murmured. "That's what betas are for." "You're the best beta in the world," I choked, the tears finally spilling over. Gregor stayed with me for a while, just talking about trivial things. I explained what Carmilla had done for Grantham, telling him that Grantham had been put in a medically induced coma to keep his body from harming itself further and was on an 4 for nutrients. Eventually, Gregor left to see his mate. I prepared myself for more sobbing, but someone else appeared at the door. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" Carmilla whispered, seeming nervous. My heart clenched as I got out of my chair. "Is Grantham okay?" I gasped. "This isn't about Grantham. It's about something else," Carmilla said carefully, leading me out of the room. "All right, what is it?" "Well, can you first promise that you won't get mad and you'll actually consider what I have to say?" I sighed. "You're freaking me out, Carmilla. Just tell me what's going on." "I found my mate." I chuckled. "That's not awful at all. You finally found the person you're supposed to spend the rest of your life with. Why did you think I would be mad?" Carmilla was suddenly unable to meet my eyes, chewing on her lower lip. You aren't mated to Jordash, are you? Oh no, Carmilla said, making a disgusted face. I would die if I was mated to him. Besides, he already has a mate. Then I don't see an issue, I said with a smile. Vianatha, I'm mated to someone who is accused of treason and is going to be locked up, Carmilla admitted, her lip trembling. I paused, considering her words. Her mate had been charged with treason. Her mate had been part of the scheme against my mate. She was mated to someone who had been involved in a plot that nearly cost Grantham his life. What do you want me to do about it? I asked, my demeanor suddenly cold. I want you to make sure he doesn't go to prison, or at least make it easier for me to see him. I can't live without him, Carmilla begged, tears pouring down her face. He means the world to me. I'll go to prison, too, if it means I get to see him. I sighed. Carmilla, this is a massive case. They tried to hide the prince so Jordash could take power. Do you not grasp how serious that is? Do you know how hard it's going to be to get them to lessen a sentence when their son was almost killed? Carmilla choked back a sob. Seeing her so upset made me soften slightly. I reached out and gave her a hug. I should have been more sensitive. I knew what it was like to fear losing a mate. I'll try and talk to the king and queen, okay? I said. Thank you, Vianatha, Carmilla blubbered. You're welcome. Now, can you tell me your mate's name? Carmilla hesitated, staring at the floor. It's Sterlio. No, I hissed. You cannot be mated to him. He already had a mate. I'm his second chance mate, please, Vianatha. Carmilla cried. He didn't do it. He didn't know what Jordash was planning. He was part of the plan, Carmilla. I can't have him in my pack, I announced. That's final. Carmilla stared at me like she was about to argue. I knew she loved this man, but everyone who was part of the scheme was facing consequences. I couldn't release a man just because he was my friend's mate. Finally, Carmilla clamped her mouth shut and stomped off. I walked back into Grantham's room, feeling terrible for what I had said, but knowing it had to be done. I loved Carmilla, but I simply couldn't free him. Not after he had a hand in what happened to the prince. Grantham's hoarse voice snagged my attention immediately. Hi, handsome, I said softly, trying to keep my tears at bay. Hearing his voice made my whole body relax. What's going on? Why are you crying? Grantham asked. He blinked slowly at me, almost like he was falling asleep again. Go back to sleep, baby, I whispered, stroking his hair. We can deal with everything later. Chapter 32. It took Grantham a few days to recover to the point where he was able to leave his bed. He wasn't strong enough for long strolls yet, but I was thrilled to see him moving again. Still, his pride was recovering more slowly than his body. You don't have to do this, Grantham protested, his voice a raspy shadow of its usual strength as I helped him toward the bathroom. You need a soak, Grantham, I argued gently. Whenever I feel like my bones are aching, a warm bath always helps. It relaxes the muscles, and a little cedar-scented steam never killed anyone. I'm a grown man, Vianatha, he snapped, though his legs were trembling from the effort of standing. And I am your mate, I murmured, ignoring his grumpy exterior. I guided him to the edge of the large tub, keeping a steadying hand on his elbow as the water steamed. There is nothing embarrassing about letting someone take care of you. He looked at the swirling water, then back at me, his eyes soft and pleading. Stay? Don't leave me in here alone. I didn't reply with words. I simply adjusted my own clothes, rolling up my sleeves, and eventually slipped into the oversized tub behind him to support his weight. I placed my hands on his broad shoulders and began to massage the knots of tension that had lived there since his rescue. Grantham didn't protest anymore. He leaned back against my chest, letting out a long, weary sigh as I traced calming patterns over his shoulders and arms. In the warmth of the water, the alpha mask he wore finally slipped away, leaving only the man I loved. Alpha Jordash told me. He said you ran away with another man, Grantham mumbled, sounding sleepy. I didn't run away with anyone, I replied, pressing a soft kiss to the back of his damp neck. Grantham opened his eyes. The haze of relaxation was replaced by a flicker of worry. There was someone else then? There was, but it's not what you think. I sighed. reluctant to break the peace of the moment. Jordash tried to force a new bond. He wanted me to mate with one of his warriors who had lost his own partner. When you went missing, I went to Jordash for help, and he used that desperation to trap me in that warrior's house. The second I realized the setup, I left. Besides, that man found his true second chance mate. He had no interest in me. So you weren't going to leave me? Never, Grantham, I whispered. I couldn't live without you. But I was an Omega then. Ranking doesn't change the soul, Grantham. I love you, no matter what title the pack gives you. He huffed, pressing his head back against my shoulder. You don't really think I'm a prince, do you? I've decided that it doesn't matter who your parents were. You're mine. The rest of the bath was peaceful. I helped him wash his hair, and for once, he didn't complain about the scent of my shampoo. By the time we finished, his eyelids were drooping. The recovery was taking everything he had. I got him tucked into bed within minutes. I was prepared to head downstairs to speak with the king and queen, but his hand caught mine. Stay, he mumbled. You're exhausted, baby. You need sleep. Grantham gave me a lazy, lopsided smile. Please, just talk to me. I missed the sound of your voice. I couldn't say no to that. I slid under the blankets beside him, tracing light shapes on his arm as I watched him settle. We spoke quietly about the future, about the second chance, warrior, and the strange twists of fate that govern our kind. I'm happy that guy found his mate, Grantham whispered. It must be terrifying, thinking you'll never be happy again. I'm just glad he stayed away from you, I teased gently, though my mind was racing. I knew the man Grantham was defending, Sterlio, was currently facing treason charges for his role in the transition of power. Once Grantham was finally deeply asleep, I slipped out of bed and changed into fresh clothes. I needed to handle the fallout of the recent chaos. Outside, the pack atmosphere was heavy. Members watched me with uncertain eyes, whispering about the royals staying in my home. I ignored the stares and made my way to Carmilla's cottage. She answered the door, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. Listen, I said before she could speak. I can't overrule the king. Sterlio is likely going to face a trial for his involvement with the old regime. But I can give you this. Carmilla looked at me guarded. I don't have time for riddles, Vianatha. Follow me. I led her across the packlands to the secure holding area where the prisoners were being kept. The guards stepped aside as I used my authority to enter the lower level. Carmilla, a voice rasped from behind the bars. It was Sterlio. I pulled the heavy key from my belt. I can't change the law, but I can give you time. I'll be back to get you before dinner. I unlocked the cell and Carmilla didn't hesitate. She vanished into the room, falling into Sterlio's arms as the door clicked shut behind her. It felt wrong to lock my friend in a cell, but seeing them cling to one another, I knew it was the only mercy I could offer for now. I turned away, leaving them to their stolen moments, wondering how many more they would have left. Chapter 33. Grantham took a few more weeks to recover before he was able to do the majority of things he used to. I wanted him to be gentle with his body, worrying that he would end up hurting himself, but he ignored all of my complaints and warnings. He would grab my hands and drag me outside for runs around the packlands. He would stay up late and watch movies with me until midnight. Even though I worried about his health frequently, I couldn't help but be thrilled with the change in him. It was like his fear of losing me had flipped a switch in his mind, and he suddenly became the mate I had always wished for. What are you thinking about? Grantham asked, tracing a finger along my jawline, his head resting on my lap. How lucky I am, I murmured back with a tiny smile. I hated to admit it, but with Grantham being so kind and gentle towards me, I had become soft myself. Grantham gave out a small sigh, closed his eyes, and grabbed my hand, giving it a strong squeeze. So, are you prepared for the trials tomorrow? Grantham asked. I tensed. I had been trying to avoid these thoughts all night. I didn't want to think about the fact that tomorrow I would be deciding the fate of several men who had harmed my mate. Some people didn't give me anxiety, like Jordash. I knew that he should be locked up for life, no questions asked, but then men like Sterlio made me hesitate. I wanted to do what was fair and reasonable, but I worried that fair and reasonable would not be easy to achieve. No, I'm not ready, but I think your parents are, I said. We get the results of my DNA test tomorrow too. Are you ready to find out if you're a princess? No, I scoffed, scrunching up my nose. Oh? Why not? Doesn't every girl want to be a princess? Grantham asked, his voice teasing. I rolled my eyes. I was never raised in that mentality. I was always raised with the idea that I was to be a ruler, and not the kind that wore massive ball gowns and a crown. I worry about what it will do to my reputation if I'm suddenly crowned as a princess, and I worry about other things as well. What is there to worry about, sugar? Grantham's green eyes stared up at me with concern. You know we can get through anything together, right? Listen, you don't have to worry about me. I think this is going to be much harder on you. I don't want to complain about it, I said. I think this is going to affect you just as much as it is going to affect me, okay? Tell me what's bothering you. I don't like knowing you're upset and not knowing why. It's just going to be hard, I admit it. What's going to be hard? All of it. V, come on. I began to nervously play with Grantham's fingers. Everything is going to change, and I'm not sure how I feel about it, but if it turns out you're not the prince, then that is going to cause some dilemmas too. What's going to happen if I'm not the prince? Well, for starters, I told your parents they could kill me, I said. I think we're beyond that at this point because, even if you're not the prince, Jordache broke several laws in the kingdom, so it wasn't a complete waste of time. And if the king and queen aren't your parents, we're going to at least find out what happened to your real parents. My parents will always be the people who raised me, no questions asked, Grantham said proudly. My mom and dad did so much for me, even the king and queen can't compete with them. If it turns out the king and queen aren't my parents, I'll be happy to go back to my mom and dad. So now, what are the problems if I do end up being a prince? I glanced down, ashamed of myself. It was so selfish of me that I didn't even want to admit it. Come on, V, Grantham pressed. Well, everything is going to change. I fought for this pack, I risked my life for this pack, and I might lose them. That's a big deal to me, Grantham. I fought to be considered a real threat to other packs, so they would respect me and my people. I made people understand that I wasn't just a partner to a leader, I was an alpha, and I was not going to let a man take that away from me. What do you mean? If you're crowned the prince, I won't be the legendary female alpha anymore. I'll just be seen as a princess in the eyes of the public. I don't want to lose who I am. I mean, I want what's best for you, and what's best for anyone is a life of luxury, but I'm still worried. Grantham sat up and wrapped his sturdy arms around me. I would never expect you to change who you are, and I hope you don't think that I'm going to change who I am just because of a crown. Life changes like this cause a turbulence in personalities, I protested. I know that, but it can't change the fact that you were brave enough to kick your parents out of your own pack when they disrespected me. It won't change the fact that you were raised not to be an alpha, but turned out like one anyway. It won't change the fact that I grew up in a shack and learned that nothing is better than a hug and a home-cooked meal. Yes, this might change our lives, but we'll still be us. Princess, queen, or alpha, I never want you to be anything you don't want to be, anything other than yourself, Grantham said. Thank you, I whispered, wrapping my arms around his neck. Chapter 34. Grantham gave my hand a grounding squeeze as Carmilla entered the waiting room, the clinical white walls feeling like they were closing in. Across the room, the king and queen sat huddled together, their fingers entwined so tightly their knuckles were white. For years, they had survived on the fragile hope that their son was still out there. Today, that hope was either going to solidify into reality or vanish forever. A part of me was terrified. I knew Grantham deserved a life of luxury after the brutality he'd endured, but the stakes felt impossibly high. If he were a prince, would I be forced to leave the pack I had built? Would the world stop seeing the alpha who carved out her own legacy and only see a royal consort? It'll be okay, Grantham whispered, leaning into my space, his breath warm against my ear. I promise. I wanted to believe him, but the knot in my stomach only tightened. We hardly need the papers to tell us the truth, Queen Sophiana said, her voice trembling with a desperate sort of excitement. What are you implying, Sophiana? The king asked, his voice gruff, though his eyes betrayed his own nerves. The bond, she breathed, looking at me. When Grantham and Vianatha mated, she was able to command our royal guards. It's the only explanation. The royal blood recognized its own authority. I felt a wave of dizziness. Carmilla, please. Just the results, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Carmilla nodded, her expression professional yet sympathetic as she looked at the document. The Queen's intuition is correct. The DNA is a definitive match. Grantham is the lost prince. The air left the room. Beside me, I felt Grantham's entire body turn to stone. Then it's time, the Queen cried, springing to her feet with tears streaming down her face. She reached out toward him, her hands shaking. We can finally call you by your name. We can call you Theodore again. Grantham didn't move. He didn't reach back. My name is Grantham, he said, his voice flat and hard. It's been my name for my entire life. I'm not changing it now. The Queen flinched as if struck. The King stepped forward, his brow furrowed in a way that commanded the room. Son, Grantham is not a name for the crown. You were raised in a different world, but that world is behind you now. You are royalty of the highest degree. A name like Grantham does not carry the weight of your true station. Vianatha, Grantham muttered, his voice cracking as he looked to me for an escape. This is a lot to process, I interjected, stepping between them and placing my hands on Grantham's shoulders to ground him. We're both going to need some time to wrap our heads around this. The King looked frustrated, and the Queen looked devastated. It was a heartbreaking sight. Finding a son only to have him retreat, but I knew that forcing this conversation now would only lead to a total breakdown. I am not Theodore, Grantham snapped the moment we stepped away, pulling me toward our home. His pace was frantic, his breathing shallow. Grantham, wait, I urged, trying to keep up with his long strides. They're just overwhelmed. Can you imagine their side of this? To them, this is a miracle. I'm not saying you have to change who you are, but we need to give them and ourselves a moment to breathe. I don't know how to be a prince. Grantham spun around, yanking his arm away. He began to pace like a caged animal. I was told I was an Omega my whole life. I lived in that shadow, thinking I'd die there. A piece of paper doesn't change the years I spent being treated like nothing. It's in your blood, Grantham, I said softly, reaching out to him. You've always been more than what they allowed you to be. You were born for leadership. Then why don't you just call me Theodore? Grantham spat, his eyes flashing with a sudden, sharp pain. I'm on your side, I argued gently, trying to stay calm. I'm just saying you have more strength than you give yourself credit for. You don't have to be afraid of your own potential. They try to beat that potential out of me, Vianatha. Grantham's voice rose to a shout, the years of suppressed trauma finally boiling over. I was never allowed to think I was anything. I survived by staying small. I made a choice to survive then, and I'm making a choice now. I will not be their puppet king. Grantham, please, we're a team. Let's talk about this. No, I'm done talking. I'm sick of everyone deciding who I'm supposed to be. You're hurting, and you're lashing out because you're scared, I countered, my own frustration beginning to leak through. Maybe you just want me to be a prince so you can have more power than you already do, Grantham said harshly. Before I could even gasp at the unfairness of the accusation, he turned and sprinted toward the tree-line. A second later, the sound of snapping bones echoed through the air as he shifted into his wolf and vanished into the shadows of the forest. I stood there for a long time, the silence of the woods ringing in my ears. If he needed to run, I'd let him run. I walked back to the house alone, the weight of the crown already feeling like a physical burden. 2 hours later, after several cups of tea, I didn't finish, and Gregor knocked on the door. The trial is starting soon. Are you ready? I suppose, I mumbled, staring at a magazine without seeing the words. Though I doubt the king and queen care much for my opinions right now. Where's Grantham? Gregor asked, looking around the empty room. I don't know, I said honestly. He gave me a speech about us being a team, then told me I was power-hungry and ran off to the woods. It's a lot for him, Vianatha, Gregor said softly. His whole identity just shattered in 10 minutes. I know that, I snapped, then sighed, rubbing my temples. I know. But being a mate means walking through the fire together. It's frustrating that he thinks he's the only one whose world is changing today. His parents are grieving a son who won't even look at them, and my entire life is being rewritten. We're all in this. He'll come back, Gregor soothed. I hope so, I said, standing up and smoothing my clothes. Because if he doesn't come back soon, his parents are going to start sentencing people without his input. And I have a feeling they aren't in a very merciful mood. Chapter 35. The trial was held in my training center. All of the men who were accused of committing a crime would be brought in one by one, and the royals, as well as I and Grantham, would have a say in their punishment. Are you ready? I asked Grantham. He hadn't come back to my home, but he had shown up to the trial, which made me relax slightly. I was still a little frustrated that he had run away, but overall, I was happy he was here now. Yes, he said coldly. Part of me wanted to demand an explanation as to why he thought he could just abandon me when I needed him. I wanted to tell him that he had been selfish, but I held back because I knew how much this was damaging him. He needed my comfort more than my yelling. I reached over and carefully laid my hand on his lap, silently calming him. Bring in the first prisoner, the king shouted. My pack watched in awe. They were all seated on one side of the training area while the royals, Grantham, and I were on the other. Some of my pack members jittered with nerves, others couldn't hold eye contact with me anymore, and it made my heart drop. I didn't want to be sitting so far away from them, high up on a stage in a plush chair, while they sat on the concrete floor. They were my pack, not my subjects. My thoughts were broken when the first prisoner was led in by 3 of my guards. It was a man I had never seen before, but Grantham instantly tensed beneath my hand, his lip curling into a snarl. Hey, it's okay, I whispered. Grantham ignored me and continued to glare at the clearly frightened man. The prisoner spoke about the part he played in the original kidnapping of the prince and explained that he was the one who had grabbed Grantham during his run. I sentence you to life in prison with no contact with the outside world whatsoever. I command that you are removed from your pack completely, the king announced. Wait, I shouted, watching the man drop to his knees. You're being unfair. You didn't give Grantham or myself an opportunity to speak. Fine, you and Theotor are more than welcome to put in your 2 cents, the king sneered. Grantham looked at me, startled by my outburst, but I just nodded in encouragement. You know what happened better than anyone else here. What do you think his sentence should be? Well, Telerin, you did a lot of wrong, but you were following orders. My sentence would be 3 years in a local prison with occasional visits, Grantham declared. The king scoffed. 3 years is hardly anything. I was the one who went through the torment. I choose the punishments, Grantham argued. The king opened his mouth to protest, but the queen laid a gentle hand over his, and he went silent. The rest of the trials proceeded similarly, with small squabbles between Grantham and his parents, but generally fair sentences were given. No one was facing more than 5 years, which warmed my heart. Grantham could have been cruel, but he recognized that many of these men were simply following their alpha. But then Sterlio came in, and the trial went sideways. Did you or did you not play a part in the capture of my son? The queen asked. I did, Sterlio admitted. I was part of the team who helped my alpha escape with Grantham when he was just a boy, but I had no involvement with the second capture. Grantham tensed, his eyes locked on Sterlio. Did you try to pursue my mate when you heard of my absence? Sterlio swallowed hard, and I could see Carmilla holding her breath. I did, he confessed. When I heard you were gone, I assumed Jordash had finally killed you. I had recently lost my own mate and was devastated. If I thought there was a chance you were coming back, I would never have approached her, I swear. I want you put away for life, Grantham seethed. No, that's wrong. I yelled, causing everyone to freeze. You can't make decisions based purely on emotion. This does not deserve a life sentence. He made a mistake, and he should be punished for his first offense, but that's not a life sentence. I think he should be imprisoned for 3 years, be rejected from his pack, and absorbed by my own to teach him to respect a female alpha, I proclaimed. Grantham was still furious and refused to look at me, but the queen was on my side. Yes, that's a fair sentence. I agree, she said. Now, bring in Jordash. I expected high emotions and shouting, but that didn't happen. My pack regarded Jordash with cold glares and the occasional snarl, but there was no outward aggression. The royals looked disgusted, and Grantham appeared remarkably calm. "Are you going to argue with me if I sentence him to life?" the king asked. I just shook my head in response. Chapter 36. How are you feeling? I asked the moment we stepped out of the training arena. Behind us, the king and queen were still huddled together, their voices low as they navigated the emotional wreckage of the day. For the first time since the DNA results had changed everything, Grantham and I were finally alone in the cool evening air. "I'm not sure," he admitted, his voice a low rumble. "I'm a little upset with you, if I'm being honest." I tried to keep my voice steady, though his words stung. "Why?" Grantham ran a hand through his hair, his silhouette sharp against the moonlight. "I know you said nothing happened with Sterlio, but I felt undermined today. I wanted to set a standard, and you stepped right over my authority in front of my father. You wanted a life sentence because of a grudge, Grantham," I countered softly. "He's Carmilla's mate. I had to choose justice over jealousy. If I had let you do that, it wouldn't have been a trial. It would have been a vendetta." "I know," he sighed, the fight finally leaving his shoulders as he looked at me. I saw the way my father looked at me when I let you take the lead. It's hard to find my footing." "It's over now," I said, reaching out to catch his hand. "The trials are done. Everyone has a fair sentence. Can we please just be US for a while? No crowns, no alphas. I just want my mate back." "I miss the quiet moments, Grantham." A familiar, mischievous glint returned to his green eyes. "Yeah? I didn't know the legendary female alpha was such a softie." Before I could retort, he lunged. I expected a hug, but instead, he started tickling me. I squealed, my laughter echoing off the stone walls as I scrambled to get away. I broke free and bolted toward the house, kicking off my shoes at the door and racing upstairs. I dived onto the bed, burying myself in a fortress of blankets just as the bedroom door pushed open. "You think those blankets are going to save you?" Grantham taunted, a playful growl in his voice as he clicked the door shut. I giggled, peeking out from the sheets. Grantham climbed onto the bed, moving with a predator's grace, and leaned down to catch my lips in a deep, lingering kiss. The playfulness vanished instantly, replaced by a sudden, electric heat that made my heart hammer against my ribs. The kiss escalated. What started as a gentle reconnection turned into a desperate need to be close. I tried to roll over, wanting to take the lead, but Grantham caught my wrists, pinning them gently above my head. A low, rumbling purr vibrated in his chest. "I'm in control tonight," he whispered against my skin. I watched, breathless, as he reached for a silk tie on the nightstand. "Do you trust me, Vianatha?" His voice was serious, his eyes searching mine. "Always," I breathed. He moved behind me, his touch light as he slipped the fabric over my eyes and knotted it at the back of my head. Suddenly, the world disappeared, leaving only the sound of his breathing and the scent of pine and rain that followed him everywhere. "Tell me if you want me to stop," he murmured, his breath hot against my ear. Without my sight, every other sense was dialed to its peak. I felt the slow, deliberate movement of his fingers against the buttons of my blouse. He took his time, savoring the anticipation. When I tried to reach out to find him, he gently nudged my hands back. "Be still," he commanded softly. I obeyed, my breath hitching as his lips found the sensitive line of my neck. He moved with a newfound confidence, his tongue tracing my collarbone, sending shivers racing down my spine. The darkness made every touch feel like a spark of electricity. "Please," I panted, my hands gripping the silk sheets as the tension in the room became thick enough to touch. "What do you want, baby?" I couldn't find the words, but I didn't need to. He moved with an intensity that spoke of all the weeks we had spent apart, the fear, the longing, and the relief of being home. It wasn't just physical, it was a claim. Every movement was a reminder that we belonged to each other, a silent vow whispered through skin and bone. I clutched at his back, my nails grazing his skin as the world began to blur into a haze of sensation. The tension in my core built like a rising tide until I couldn't hold back anymore. I cried out his name, my entire body trembling as a wave of pure, unadulterated bliss crashed over me. A moment later, Grantham let out a ragged breath and collapsed beside me, pulling me into the crook of his arm. We lay there in the quiet dark, our hearts beating in a frantic, matching rhythm. I reached up and pulled off the blindfold, the dim light of the room rushing back in. Grantham was looking at me, his eyes dark with affection and the lingering heat of the moment. "Was that okay?" he whispered, brushing a stray hair from my damp forehead. "It was perfect," I gasped, pulling the covers over us both. "Welcome home, Grantham." Chapter 37. "Wake up, baby," Grantham cooed. The morning sunbeams were targeted directly at my eyes, and I could hear birds outside my window acting as my personal alarm clock, but I just rolled closer to Grantham with a moan. He chuckled and slid his strong arms around me, holding me while he peppered me with kisses. "Come on, we have to go shopping," Grantham murmured. "The king and queen are hosting a ball in our honor, and I think I might need some new clothes." "Just 5 more minutes," I groaned, pressing my face against his chest. "Still sleepy?" "No, just snuggly," I said. Grantham sighed and kissed the top of my head. "All right, I can't deny you that. Last time you went shopping, you had a panic attack," I pointed out. "I don't think you should go again, at least not until you feel like you can handle it." "I can handle it," Grantham said, though his voice wavered. "I'll pick you up a suit jacket, some pants, and a tie to match whatever dress I find, as long as you have a plain black dress shirt," I offered. "I do have a black dress shirt," he murmured. "Good, then I'll take Carmilla with me. I think a distraction would be good for her." Grantham shrugged. "I'm not sure how she feels about you right now," he warned. "I'm not sure either, but this will certainly help clear the air." After I convinced Grantham to stay in bed with me for an extra half hour, I managed to pull myself from the sheets, shower, and get ready. Grantham went downstairs to start cooking breakfast, and by the time I reached the kitchen, I was greeted with a mountain of pancakes. How did I ever get so lucky? I wondered aloud as I sat down on a bar stool. Grantham grinned and flipped another pancake. "I could say the same to you." I gave a dreamy sigh and began eating, allowing myself to just adore the present. I was here with the man I loved. How could anything be better? Eventually, I finished eating and, after a goodbye kiss, I was off to Carmilla's. My pack members were still acting quite strangely towards me, but it had been so long since they regarded me properly that I had simply given up. They probably knew they were in limbo, considering I might be moving to Germany. My heart clenched at the thought, so I blocked it out as best I could and knocked on Carmilla's door. She answered right away. She didn't look as chipper as usual, but she didn't look resentful either. "Alpha Vianatha," she greeted bleakly. "Hey, Carmilla. How are you?" She just shrugged in response. "Listen, the king and queen are hosting a ball tonight, and I was wondering if you wanted to come dress shopping with me. I think it would be a good distraction." Carmilla played with the ends of her hair. "I'm really not sure." "All right," I sighed. "I think it would be fun, but I won't make you." Carmilla shrugged. "You know what? Getting out of the house for a few hours won't kill me. Maybe some fresh air will be good." "Great," I beamed, tugging her toward the car. For a while, there was no conversation at all. Carmilla just stared out the window. Sometimes she looked close to tears, and as much as I wanted to comfort her, I knew it was best for her to face her emotions. I feared that we would be moving soon, and I would have to leave my pack for good. "Do you think they'll let me volunteer to go into the prison with Sterlio?" Carmilla asked suddenly. "Oh, Carmilla," I gasped. "That's a difficult request." "I know you love him, but I don't think anyone would allow it." The thought of my sweet pack doctor in a cold dungeon disgusted me. I knew she loved Sterlio, and I would want to do the same for Grantham, but I couldn't put her in that kind of danger. "I can't bear to be without him, Vianatha." "I will go to prison if it means I get to see him every day," Carmilla protested. "Listen, we'll think of a better plan." "I can't let you do that to yourself," I countered. "Please, just trust me. As your alpha and your friend, you have to know I want what's best for you." Carmilla looked like she was about to argue, but then she nodded and stayed quiet. Once we got to the mall, the conversation lightened. We talked about dresses and what colors matched our complexions. I hoped the distraction made Carmilla feel better because it certainly made my heart less heavy. Do you really love him? Carmilla asked as she flicked through some clothes. More than I ever thought I could, I said dreamily. Do you think you would have loved him this much if he wasn't a royal? I paused to stare at her. What do you mean by that? I demanded. It just seems like it would be difficult to run a pack with an Omega by your side. What would he be anyway? A Luna. My pack respects me. It took me forever to earn that respect, but I got it, I answered sharply. If he were not a royal, he would still rule by my side if he chose to. My pack would show him the same respect they show me because that is what he deserves regardless of status. It's no different than any other mate bond. In fact, it would be easier if he wasn't royalty. What do you mean by that? Carmilla asked. I don't want to be a princess, Car. I was happy being an alpha. I just don't want to lose everything I worked for, I whispered, feeling close to tears. I'd follow Grantham anywhere, but I don't want to lose my pack. Carmilla gave me a sad smile. You don't have to worry about losing us. We'll be here for you whenever you need us. We're all just hoping you don't forget about us. Never, I mumbled, pulling Carmilla into a tight hug. Chapter 38. The ball was held in the training arena, which felt odd considering we had just sentenced prisoners there only a day ago. Still, it was nothing less than extravagant, featuring floral centerpieces, soft lighting, and elegant black accents. I had to admit the king and queen made quick and beautiful work of the space. But I was hardly paying attention to the decorations or the gentle music. My eyes were locked on Grantham, who looked beyond handsome. He had become much healthier since I first found him and was recovering well from the recent trauma. His shoulders were broader, his posture regal, and his eyes bright. Seeing him in a fitted suit with a warm smile on his lips made my heart melt. I was so incredibly proud of the man he had become. You look amazing, V, Grantham whispered as he neared me. His eyes roved over me, and the arm he wrapped around my waist was possessive. I really love the way you look in black, he growled playfully. Well, I love the way you look in a suit, I purred back. Grantham chuckled. You really are trying to kill me, aren't you? I laughed, spun out of his arms, and proceeded toward some of my pack mates. You look lovely, Alpha, one of them commented. I thanked him, feeling like a goddess in my dress. It was long, flaring out in a slight mermaid style with pale gold fabric covered in elegant black lace. The backless design made me feel incredibly confident. Supper began quickly. My pack was seated at a dozen tables throughout the arena, while Grantham and I sat at a long table with the king and queen. The atmosphere shifted from light to tense. So, Theotor, how has the pack been taking the news of your heritage? The queen asked kindly. I admired how she softened the king's sharp edges, and I knew I could eventually become fond of her. Grantham, however, seemed to reject their lifestyle. Ask Vianatha, it's her pack. I've only been here a few months, he grumbled, focusing on his meal. Well, Vianatha, how do you think your pack is managing? It must be frightening for them with so much changing, the queen mused. It must be terribly hard for you as their alpha. It hasn't been easy, I agreed with a tight smile, willing myself not to cry. They trust me to make the right choices for them. I'm sure you will. Your pack is extremely devoted to you. I haven't seen a pack love their alpha this much in years. What you have done here is truly amazing, the queen said. Her composure was so soft it made my heart ache for the years of motherly love Grantham had missed. Yes, it's going to be very hard for your pack when you leave them to come live at the castle, the king stated bluntly. I felt a wave of nausea. I'm not leaving my pack, I snapped, my emotions becoming unhinged. Well, you'll have to if you want to be a royal. You can't bring them all with you, the king scoffed. You could hardly have a standard pack running around the palace. Grantham's hand clenched his silverware, his jaw tightening, but he remained silent. Avangard, that's enough, the queen hissed. Can't you see you're upsetting them? It's time they faced facts, he chided. She can't be a queen, look at her. The lovely feeling I had in my dress disappeared instantly. Tears flooded my eyes. I need some fresh air, I blubbered, standing up. I'll come with you, Grantham offered. I didn't reply. I just hurried out of the arena, careful not to trip in my heels. Once the cold air hit my face, the tears spilled over. "Oh, V," Grantham whispered, pulling me into a hug. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea he was such an unpleasant man. If you don't want to go to Germany, we won't go. I'd be happy to stay here with you and your pack." "No, we can't do that," I mumbled, brushing away the tears. Who would be the next king and queen? "We have to go." I just hated the way he talked about my pack, like they're disposable. "Vianatha, we can stay." "Grantham, I'm serious. I can't be selfish. I can deal with your father if it means you finally have the life you deserve and if it keeps peace in the community," I said. "But your pack." "I'll think of something," I said, sounding more confident than I felt. We stayed outside for a few more minutes to calm down. The king had struck a nerve with both of us. "We've got this," I whispered, pulling him in for a kiss. "We're a team. We're a power couple," Grantham agreed with a small smile, opening the door so we could rejoin the ball. When we returned to the table, there was an awkward silence until the queen jabbed the king with her elbow. He winced. "I would like to apologize for my insensitivity," he blurted out. After another sharp jab from the queen, he added, "I understand this is a tough time. I hope we can look past it and carry on." Grantham and I both nodded. The ceremony was bittersweet. I knew I couldn't stay, but it felt final. Soon, I would be moving to Germany and leaving my pack behind. I was thankful the ceremony was a condensed version, as the official announcement would happen at the castle. Regardless, when the king spoke and proclaimed Grantham and me as the next in line for the throne, I shivered. When the heavy, jewel-encrusted crown was placed on my head, I felt the weight of the future. But then I looked at Grantham. He looked strong and regal with a crown on his head, like he was born for it. I realized that staying here would have been the wrong choice for both of us. I needed a challenge, and he needed a fresh start. "I now pronounce you the next king and queen," the king boomed. My pack erupted in applause, and Grantham squeezed my hand lovingly. As long as he was by my side, I could do this. Chapter 39. The day I was to officially leave my pack, it rained. In fact, it poured so heavily that the ceremony had to be moved inside the training arena. The atmosphere was lighter than it had been in a long time since the king and queen left, but the weight of what was coming sat heavily on my chest. My pack milled around happily, no longer under the scrutiny of the royals, unaware of the announcement I was about to make. I became jittery as Grantham and I stood on the stage. I could look at any member of my pack and easily recall their name, their family, and their history. I had worked my whole life to ensure they saw me not just as a leader, but as a friend. Now, that was ending. I was boarding a plane tomorrow for a new continent, headed for a life in a castle I had never truly seen. "It's okay, Vianatha," Grantham whispered, giving my hand a soft squeeze. "You can do this." "I know," I murmured back. But knowing it was necessary didn't make looking at their faces any easier. "Well, hello everyone," I said, my voice echoing through the hall. I tried to smile, but it wavered. "I know you aren't sure why I gathered you here, but I have an announcement to make. As you know, Grantham is the heir to the throne." My eyes began to water. "Because of our duties to the crown, we will be leaving for Germany tomorrow." A shocked, horrified silence fell over the room. For a moment, I wanted to tell them it was a joke, that I wasn't going anywhere. But Grantham tugged me against his side, steadying me. "What are we going to do without an alpha?" someone shouted from the crowd. "I wouldn't leave you without a leader," I answered, pulling myself together and trying to look strong. "I have someone in mind who has accepted the role, provided his mate is in agreement." I glanced around the bewildered crowd and managed a small grin. "Sterlio, could you come up here, please?" Sterlio stepped timidly from behind the stage. The silence turned into a collective gasp, and then a squeal rang out as Carmilla rushed onto the stage, nearly tackling him. He was part of the group that took Grantham, a man protested. "We can't have him running our pack." "I understand the concern," I agreed, but Sterlio was following orders. His actions were driven by a misguided loyalty to a former leader, and he has shown true remorse. "I trust this man to keep you safe. And since his mate is our beloved doctor, I believe we can all rest assured that your well-being will always be his priority. Carmilla looked up at me, overwhelmed. So, Sterlio isn't going to prison? No, he's staying right here with you, Grantham murmured. Carmilla sobbed into Sterlio's chest as he held her tight, clearly fighting back his own emotions. Wait, Carmilla blurted out, pulling back slightly. If he's the Alpha, does that make me the Luna? It does, I confirmed. I knew this was a massive life change for her. Sterlio had been easy to convince. The honor of being an Alpha far surpassed a prison cell, but Carmilla was more level-headed. I bit my lip and looked at Grantham, who just winked at me. Do you really think I can do it? Carmilla asked. I do, I answered. Everyone has loved you since the day you were born. They've been waiting for you to find a mate to rule beside. This is your opportunity to be what you were always meant to be. Carmilla looked at Sterlio, who smiled warmly. It's up to you. I can't do this without you, but I won't force you into a life you aren't ready for. I'll do it, Carmilla said firmly. The pack erupted into cheers, their sadness at my departure momentarily replaced by the excitement of their new leaders. I felt a bittersweet pang of relief. She's going to make a wonderful Luna, I murmured. And you, Grantham whispered back, are going to make a magnificent queen. Chapter 40. Are you ready, Alpha? Gregor asked, poking his head into my new bedroom. I continued to stare at myself in the mirror. I didn't look like myself anymore. I wasn't wearing the functional, versatile clothes I was known for, nor did I have the fresh, clear skin I was used to. I didn't look like the sturdy, powerful Alpha I had always been. I looked beautiful in the floor-length, wine-colored gown. I looked like a goddess with the way the material flowed around my body, and the jewels encrusted in the bodice made me glow. My eyelashes had been painted black, my cheeks pink, and my lips matched my dress. The hair that usually tumbled down my back was now pinned in a tight, elegant bun. I don't look like an Alpha, I whispered. No, you don't, Gregor agreed, sliding into the room. He placed his hands on my shoulders. Vianatha, this is the next chapter in your life. You're stepping into something even greater. With your mate beside you, you can accomplish anything your heart desires. I will be supporting you every step of the way, you know that. I smiled at Gregor through the mirror. Thank you, Gregor. I don't know what I would do without you. You'd amble through your life blindly, that's what. Now come, we need to get to the ceremony. Everyone is waiting. I let him lead me through the castle. I still had very little idea where everything was, but he seemed to have a firm grasp on the layout despite only being here for a few days. Bringing him to the castle as my right-hand man was already paying off. In minutes, we reached the throne room. Gregor stopped to give me a smile, then surprised me by bowing lowly. Through this door, princess. Gregor, you don't have to do this, I said. You are a princess now, Vianatha. Get used to this kind of treatment. Now go, you don't want to keep everyone waiting. As I walked towards the entrance, a guard noticed me and swung open the doors, announcing, "All rise for the princess." And just like that, everyone was on their feet, eyes curious, heads bowed, as I slowly entered the grand room. I was careful not to trip in my heels, but I quickened my pace when I saw Grantham. He was sitting on a throne, his green eyes locked on me with an amazing smile on his face. The second I was close enough, I sat in the open chair next to him and reached for his hand. You look amazing, Vianatha, Grantham whispered. You do too, I murmured back. And he did. His suit fit him perfectly, and he was glowing with happiness and pride. He might have been raised differently, but this was his home, and he knew it now. Are you ready for this? He asked quietly. I chuckled and squeezed his hand. Not even a little bit, but that's part of the adventure. Grantham laughed a little as well. That moment was one of the most anxiety-inducing of my life. I was stepping into the role of a princess with the future of a queen ahead of me. But when I looked at Grantham's smiling face and caught the eye of the parents who had raised him in the crowd, my heart warmed. Gregor was right. This was what I was meant to do. I was meant for something bigger than just being an alpha, and Grantham was meant for so much more than what he had been told he was. This was going to be our adventure together.